My ex-husband panicked after finding out about my pregnancy test. After 3 years of secret marriage, he spoiled her, loved her and protected her, making her think that this was love. But until Bai Yueguang returned, she realized that his years of pampering were just a substitute, and she reluctantly took the money and left with the pregnancy. Chapter 1, Pregnant. She cautiously opened her eyes, only relaxing when she saw that Sai Kaosan had already zipped up his suit pants. She gasped for breath, her eyes hazy as she looked at her own hand. 3 years of marriage, and this was the first time she had done something like this for him. They had always been traditional, but for some reason today, he insisted she use her hands. Thinking about how he had coaxed and teased her just now, her face burned uncontrollably. Sai Kaosan put on his clothes, the luxurious custom-made suit accentuating his striking handsomeness and his dignified aura. The same fingers that usually signed billion-dollar deals with ease were now carefully cleaning her hand, his touch so gentle that it made her feel cherished. Unconsciously, she placed a hand on her lower abdomen. Ron Wan thought that after the medical checkup, he would find out about the baby growing inside her. Her heart was filled with both nervousness and anticipation. I'm not going with you to the checkup today, Sai Kaosan said indifferently. Why not? 1111 is back. I'm going to marry her. A thunderbolt out of a clear sky. She's heart, once burning with warmth, turned ice cold in an instant. Her face went pale, her lips trembling. Then, what about me? We're getting a divorce. His voice was light yet brooked no argument. It was like a knife to her heart. 3 years of marriage, yet it couldn't compare to the moment his white moonlight returned. A bitter taste rose in her throat. Numbly, she turned to leave, but Sai Kaosan grabbed her wrist. Where are you going? She's coming back, isn't she? I'm going to pack my things, she said hoarsely. Tears welled up, threatening to spill over. But she didn't want him to see. He didn't love her. No matter how much she cried or threw a tantrum, her tears were meaningless to him. Feeling his grip still firm on her wrist, she tried to pull away, but he held on even tighter. Seeing that he had no intention of letting go, she simply stopped struggling. The two remained locked in a silent standoff. Only when a servant called them downstairs for breakfast did Sai Kaosan finally release his hold. Eat first. Your health isn't good, he said. She replied softly. They went downstairs, one in front and one behind, and took their seats at the dining table. Delicious dishes were laid out, along with a divorce agreement. No wonder he wanted her to eat first, he had already prepared everything. She let out a bitter chuckle, picking up the divorce papers and silently reading through them. He was offering her half of the Sai family's shares, an enormous sum. Just the dividends alone would be more than she could spend in several lifetimes. All she had to do was sign, and she would have it all. But this wasn't what she wanted. She only wanted a complete family with him. She had been so close to having it, but that woman came back. Seeing her eyes turn red, Sai Kaosan handed her a tissue. Why are you crying? She wanted to tell him about the baby. Ask if they could stay together. But the divorce papers were already on the table, his choice made clear. Should she still beg? She forced a smile to mask her sorrow. Why are you giving me so much? As your husband, it's what I should do. She felt a lump in her throat. Sai Kaosan also fell silent. Time passed. The food was getting cold. Eat first, he finally said. His long, elegant fingers picked up shrimp, peeling them skillfully and placing them in her bowl. One after another. She watched silently. She thought, if this was just a business marriage, wouldn't he have to be so thoughtful and attentive, would he? After a moment's hesitation, she decided to fight for the baby one last time. She didn't want her child to grow up in a broken family, just like she did. If I said I was pregnant, could we? Clatter. Sai Kaosan's chopstick slipped from his hand, hitting the table with a crisp sound. He was always composed and restrained. It was rare to see him react like this. But just now, she had seen it clearly. For a split second, a flicker of disbelief flashed across his usually calm and dignified face. He didn't say a word, but his expression seemed to scream, how could that be possible? Was the idea of her being pregnant so unacceptable to him? Did he truly not want this child? She lowered her gaze, her lips curling into a self-mocking smile. The last bit of hope in her heart shattered completely. What was she expecting? Now that 1111 was back, how could he possibly change his mind for a child? How could a 3-year business marriage compare to a childhood sweetheart and first love? There was no reason left to stay. With swift determination, she signed the divorce papers, grabbed her phone and coat, and walked out without even packing her things. She bit her lip, forcing back the tears. Is it true? Just as she opened the car door, Sai Chaos-n's voice rang out behind her. Her eyes stung. She dared not turn back. What? You said you were pregnant. Is it true? Yes. Their child. But his reaction moments ago had already told her he cared more about that woman than their baby. She didn't want to humiliate herself any further. She clenched her fists. The doctor said that after my accident, I need more time to recover. I can't get pregnant for now. In reality, she had stopped taking her medication half a month ago when she noticed her period was late. She had been ecstatic. She thought he would be just as happy. But she was wrong. That's good, he suddenly said. She didn't know what was good about it. You have someone you like, don't you? Sai Chaos-n looked at her steadily, an unreadable emotion flickering in his eyes. These past few years, being tied down by our marriage must have been hard for you too. I'll handle the work on my end as soon as possible. Then we'll finalize the divorce. She closed her eyes, suffocating. The person she liked was him. The person she wanted to be with was him. But after 3 years of marriage, he never even noticed. Perhaps. The only one he ever cared about was Ning 1111. Fine. Divorce. At least he would be happy. That's good, she said, before stepping into the car. The driver shut the door, stepped on the gas, and sped away. Watching the car disappear into the distance. Sai Chaos-n stood still for a long time. Eventually, he stubbed out his cigarette and pulled out his phone. Let me know the moment Madam's medical report comes out. Chapter 2, Mother-in-law has something to do. The driver agreed and drove She to her destination. After watching her go upstairs, he hurriedly took out his phone to report, Boss Sai, their wife didn't go to the hospital, she went back to the villa. Sai Chaos-n frowned, his eyes darkened, got it. In the villa. She ran into Tang Ning as soon as she entered the door. Seeing her eyes were red and swollen, she couldn't hide it and had to tell everything after repeated questioning. After listening to Tang Ning, she took off the mask from her face and was shocked for a long time. When your family was about to go bankrupt, no one dared to help. Sai Chaos-n said that he wanted to arrange a marriage, but anyone with a discerning eye knew that he wanted to marry you at all costs. After you married him, you had a car accident, and he took care of you day and night. Now your first love comes back and wants a divorce. This is too outrageous. Could it be that his consideration and affection for you over the years were all fake? Suddenly. She looked She up and down. Do you think it could be that? You look a lot like his Bai Yueguang, and he used you as a stand-in, so he chose to marry you when you were in the most difficult time. How else could she explain that Bai Yueguang wanted to divorce her as soon as he came back? She lay on the bed and smiled tiredly. You filmed too many melodramatic TV series, haven't you? She didn't know if it was because of Tang Ning's words, but after she fell asleep, she had a dream. In the dream, she and Sai Chaos-n made love until the end, and when he looked at her, his eyes were extremely gentle and affectionate. I've waited for you for 3 years, and you're finally back. She woke up suddenly, panting unsteadily. Awake. After hearing Tang Ning's voice, she suddenly realized that it was just a dream. She took a while to sit up. Seeing the scenery outside the window receding, she realized that she was in a car. Where are we going? Tang Ning said that she was here to record a celebrity dating variety show, but she was afraid that she would be upset at home alone, so she brought her along. She was attracted to dating variety shows. She had only watched clips on a certain audio platform in her spare time, and had never watched it live. This novelty made her subconsciously take out her phone to share it with him, but when she was halfway through typing, she suddenly remembered that they were about to get divorced. She deleted the words silently and locked the screen. She pulled the blanket over her wet eyes. She knew that they were about to get divorced, but as soon as she woke up, her mind couldn't help but think of him. He should have seen Ning 1111 by now. Are they talking about their longing for each other after not seeing each other for several years? Suddenly, it felt like a piece was missing from my heart, and it was empty and uncomfortable. She took a deep breath and put her hand on her stomach. Don't worry, baby. Even without a dad, mom can take care of you alone. After a long time, she picked up her phone again and sent a message to Sai Chaos Hen. She, when are you going to get a divorce? Sai Chaos Hen replied almost immediately, I'm busy with work. She felt an indescribable feeling when she saw this message. Like a loss and a relief, all these feelings mixed together and made her feel uncomfortable. Then she sent another message. She, okay, remember to contact me when you're done. After typing these words, it was as if she had used up all her strength. She put the phone screen down and didn't see a new message pop up at all. Sai Chaos Hen, remember to go for a physical examination. Tangning and she got out of the car and walked towards the recording site of the program. The assistant followed behind with an umbrella. A proud woman came towards them. She stepped aside to make way, but the woman kept bumping into her. She had no choice but to protect her belly and back away again and again. The woman sneered when she saw that she didn't bump into him. You're quite good at seeing things and getting out of here in time, otherwise it wouldn't just be a simple bump into you. The atmosphere at the recording site was low, as the woman who had just deliberately bumped into she at the door had stopped performing because she didn't like her makeup. The show was about to start filming, but they couldn't find a suitable person to fill the vacancy, so now they could only let the 3 male and 2 female guests wait in vain. The director was very annoyed, and when he saw she standing beside him, all his annoyance and anger were transformed into surprise. She just stood there quietly and coldly, like a fairy on the moon. Isn't this the image of a cold fairy that he had always wanted to present in his mind? The director hurriedly called Tangning to communicate, but Wan felt that it was not a good idea to film this while she was still married. Tangning explained, dating variety shows are all scripted. If someone like you quit, you can just help out. And since you are an amateur and are on a dating variety show with celebrities, they won't show you much for the sake of ratings. Besides, that person doesn't watch entertainment channels all year round. You can just relax and experience the celebrities' dating scenes up close. No way. What's the point of not talking about love in a dating variety show? What she said was just to trick she into participating. She has loved Sai Chaos Hen wholeheartedly for these years. She has been thinking about him all the time. She is pregnant, but when Bai Yueguang said she wanted to come back, that bastard divorced her immediately. How could she tolerate this? She has played the role of Bai Yueguang's wife, becoming a mistress countless times. Others may not know, but doesn't she know what will happen next? She just wants she to be amazing in the dating variety show, and be surrounded by the male guests like a star and laugh happily. Make that bastard regret it. Tangning didn't even give she time to think, and brought her directly to the camera. She had no choice but to greet the guests. She nodded slightly, her long hair as black as silk falling down her shoulders. Hello everyone, I'm the last one, and female number 3, she. The room instantly became quiet, and after a few seconds of silence, she was showered with compliments. Where did you find such a beautiful amateur? No wonder that bitch suddenly got mad and quit. It turns out she was here to copy the person who had plastic surgery, and she ran away because she was ashamed. She didn't have the mind to gossip, she just felt that it was not as difficult to fit in as she imagined. She breathed a sigh of relief and found an inconspicuous corner to sit down. A cup of warm water suddenly appeared in front of her. It was handed to her by male number 2. He was dressed casually and had a gentle and elegant temperament. Don't be nervous. I'm also an amateur. I think what your friend said is right. Just treat it as a normal show. She whispered a thank you. She felt familiar with his face and asked tentatively, are you Shu Hesi? Shu Hesi's warm face smiled like a spring breeze. He said, you remember. In fact, he recognized she from the moment she entered the door. She still had the same temperament as before that others could not imitate deliberately. Just standing there quietly, she could easily attract everyone's attention. I thought she would not remember him, but when she called out his name accurately, my heart still swayed uncontrollably. Chapter 3, Really Pregnant. Shu Hesi was Ron Gush's college classmate, majoring in medicine. They didn't have much in common, but both of them were very good in school. They were mentioned every time at a speech meeting, and Wan remembered them over time. Shu Hesi thought of the things that happened in the Gu family and asked, I haven't seen you since graduation. Are you doing well? Ji Yushi's eyes gradually dimmed, and she didn't know whether it was good or bad. If it was bad, she was indeed asked for a divorce by her beloved, but from another perspective, she could finally stop the loss in time and leave someone who didn't love her. For a moment, she really didn't know how to start. The buzzing of her mobile phone interrupted her thoughts. She looked down and saw that it was a call from Saikayasen. Suddenly, she remembered that he said in the morning that he would contact her when he was not busy. This was asking her to get a divorce. Ji Yushi took a deep breath and stood up to answer the phone, but was reminded by the staff that she was recording a program and it was best not to answer the phone unless necessary. She may have something urgent. Shu Hesi spoke up to help her out at the right time, and when he looked at Ji Yushi, his tone was gentle. "I'll talk to him, you go first." Ji Yushi smiled at him gratefully, then walked to a place where no one was and pressed the answer button. Before she could think of how to start, the man on the other end of the phone couldn't wait to say, "Did you forget what else you wanted to say?" "I didn't forget." "You still said you didn't forget." "I really didn't forget." Her fingers were clenched until they turned white, and there was a hint of sadness in her calm tone. "I know you said you wanted a divorce, I'll be there right away." Saikayasen was silent for a moment. "Let's put the divorce aside for now, it's Mom who has something urgent to tell us." Ji Yushi suddenly became nervous. What's wrong with Mom? Today is the day for the Sai family to have a collective physical examination. If there is something wrong, it's probably that something is wrong with the body. Her mother-in-law had always treated her well. She had been without a mother since she was a child. It was her mother-in-law who gave her the maternal love she had longed for. In her heart, she had secretly regarded her mother-in-law as her mother. Now that her mother-in-law was in trouble, she was more anxious than anyone else. Saikayasen heard her getting nervous and said calmly, "I'm not sure. I'll find you where you are now." Saikayasen didn't pretend to be nice about her mother-in-law and told her the address directly. Soon, he arrived. Ji Yushi greeted Tang Ning and got in the car without even changing her clothes from the show. Unlike her usual short-sleeved and long pants when she was bare-faced, she put on light makeup today and wore a lotus pink dress with small flying sleeves, revealing her smooth and white arms, which was really dazzling. Ji Yushi was worried about her mother-in-law's condition and didn't notice his gaze. She turned around to fasten her seatbelt and felt a familiar burning touch on her lower back. The force was strong and overbearing, forcing her to straighten her body and lean forward. "Look up." From the rearview mirror, she saw Saikayasen meticulously applying ointment to her. His fingertips gently rubbed her lower back, making her tremble uncontrollably. How could he do this? They were obviously going to get divorced. Ji Yushi's face instantly turned red, and she struggled to get up. "Don't move." The man pressed his big hand, and the woman could no longer move. The car instantly became quiet, with only a hint of medicine floating in the air. After applying it, Ji Yushi immediately stood up and huddled aside. Saikayasen glanced at her and said with a smile, "You're not afraid of mosquito bites in the summer." From the front, it looked like a nice long dress that covered her ankles, but I didn't expect there was such an ingenious hollow design on the back. The exposed thin white waist was densely covered with bite marks. Repressing the irritability in my heart, I leaned over to fasten her seat belt. Ji Yushi pursed her lips and looked at him. When he was full of her, she would always mistakenly think that he had her in his heart. But it was this wrong judgment that caused her to sink deeper and deeper, unable to extricate herself. A fine and dense sourness rose in her heart. She forced herself to ignore it, pushed his hand away and pulled the seatbelt. "I can do it myself." Saikayasen didn't give her a chance. He directly pulled the seatbelt, clicked it, and fastened it for her. "It's just a seatbelt, you don't have to take it to heart." He put his slender fingers on the steering wheel, started the car, and arrived soon. Ji Yushi got out of the car behind him, and when she looked up, she found that he brought her to the hospital. When she thought of him asking about pregnancy this morning, her heart was instantly raised to her throat, and she asked anxiously, "Why are you here?" "The medicine just now is slow to relieve itching and swelling. If I send you back like this, I don't know how my mother will nag me for not taking good care of you." Saikayasen looked indifferent. "So that's how it is." She felt disappointed and self-mocking at the same time. "That's right, Bai Yueguang has come back, so naturally he doesn't want to have anything to do with her. Even if he does, he probably doesn't want to have anything to do with her." She took a deep breath to adjust her mood, but then she heard him say, "By the way, do a physical examination." "Physical examination?" Heart was lifted again. Ji Yushi's hands and feet were instantly cold. The physical examination also included a pregnancy test. I wanted to give him a surprise in the morning, but now the situation is different. If I really go for a physical examination, the baby in my belly will definitely be discovered. They were about to reach the department. Ji Yushi's fingers were trembling with nervousness, but she didn't dare to pull his hand. She just hurriedly pulled the corner of his clothes. How about another day? It's late today and they all have to get off work. Saikayasen stopped and looked back at her. Why are you nervous? Without waiting for her to reply, he suddenly leaned over, his eagle-like eyes staring straight at her flat belly. Are you really pregnant? Suddenly, his mind popped up that he had given up his ideals for Ning 1111's joke and devoted himself to the family business. In just 1 year, he used thundering means to sit in the position of the century-old ruler of the Sai family. In order to be with Ning 1111, he could be so cruel to her, not to mention a baby that has not yet taken shape and may very likely become an obstacle to their marriage. She was afraid. She was afraid to hear those 2 words from Saikayasen, abort. Ji Yushi pinched her palms tightly and pretended to be calm and said, I'm not. After a while, Saikayasen moved his eyes away from her belly. You have been in a car accident and you must come for a checkup every year. A comprehensive physical examination is for your own good. At the end, he added meaningfully, if anything is really found during the examination, we won't. At this time, his cell phone rang. Saikayasen looked down and said, I'm going to answer a call. Ji Yushi nodded, and as she watched Saikashen's back gradually walk away, she breathed a sigh of relief. But for some reason, she always felt that the sentence he just didn't finish gave her an absurd idea. Perhaps he was looking forward to the arrival of the baby just like herself. Chapter 4, You Are a Substitute. I dare not be so self-indulgent as I did this morning. Ji Yushi pursed her lips, wondering whether to ask. Saikayasen walked over with long legs, but he looked very gloomy. He asked her, did you go to participate in the variety show this afternoon? Ji Yushi was stunned. He didn't expect him to ask this suddenly. She nodded first, and just as she was about to explain, she was interrupted by a sudden cold tone. He said coldly, do you know that you almost killed 1111 by stealing her variety show? There was a bang in my head. After a few seconds, Ji Yushi matched the name Ning 1111 with the woman who deliberately bumped into her in the afternoon. I didn't grab it. She just didn't want to shoot, so I was temporarily pulled in to be a substitute. If you don't believe me, I can call the director. Then she took out her cell phone from her bag and looked through the address book. But her hand was intercepted by Saikayasen in mid-air, and he pulled her to the ward. As they walked, he suddenly explained, 1111 had a car accident before, she can't be stimulated. Come with me to apologize first. They came to Ning 1111's ward. She had just been rescued. She was huddled in a corner of the bed, scared, trembling, and helpless. Her hair was messy and she looked nothing like the arrogant girl she had been in the afternoon when she wore sunglasses and a mask. When she raised her head, Ji Yushi was extremely shocked. She looked at Ning 1111's face as if she was looking in a mirror. Ning 1111's face was as pale as paper, her lips were not a bit thinner than Ji Yushi's, and her eyes were not as lively as hers. Tang Ning's words from that morning, his using you as a substitute, suddenly echoed in her mind, like a spell that couldn't be shaken off. Ning 1111 seemed not to notice Ruan Wan standing at the door. She just hugged Saikayasen tightly, and with a pitiful look on her face, she kept burrowing into his arms. Second brother, I didn't jump off the building on purpose. I was just angry that someone took away something I worked so hard for. Her voice was soft and delicate, and she spoke in a way that aroused infinite pity, especially now that her tone was filled with grievance. Saikayasen comforted him softly, don't be so impulsive in the future. You've been in a car accident and you can't be stimulated. Okay. Ning 1111 bit her lips tightly, clutched the corner of the quilt tightly, and nodded. She was so well behaved and obedient that people loved her. Saikayasen took the quilt and covered her with it carefully, gently and considerately as if he was taking care of some rare national treasure. The look he gave Ning 1111 was doting and indulgent. Ji Yushi suddenly wanted to laugh. 3 years ago, Gu's company went bankrupt, and Saikayasen came to her on his own initiative. This was probably the reason why he wanted to help Gu's company without hesitation after just one look at her. Ning 1111 cried for a long time. She licked her dry lips, pouted and said coquettishly, "Second brother, I'm thirsty, can you bring me some water?" "Okay." Sai Kaosen tucked the quilt in for her before getting up. When he passed the door of the ward, he said to Ji Yushi, "Apologize to 1111. We'll go home after I get some water." Ji Yushi didn't say anything. After Sai Kaosen left, the ward became frighteningly quiet. For a long time, Ning 1111 was willing to turn her head and look Ji Yushi up and down with a scrutinizing gaze, and disdain gradually emerged in her eyes. "I warned you in the afternoon to stay away from second brother, but I didn't expect that you would still shamelessly stick to second brother now." "I don't." Ji Yushi was about to explain when he was interrupted by Ning 1111. "I heard from my second brother that you were born in a wealthy family like the Jiyu family, but you didn't have a good life. Because you were pretty, your father trained you as a tool for marriage. To put it bluntly, you were just a cash cow. Even your mother died early, and your brother became a fool and was locked up in the hospital. As a result, you grew up in such an environment and were extremely lacking in love and security. Am I right?" They were really close, and he even told her all this. Ji Yushi pinched her fingers tightly, trying not to think too much, but she still felt like she had fallen into an ice cave, cold from head to toe. Those unpleasant memories that had been buried in the dust were spoken out without any warning. It felt like being stripped naked and thrown into the street, being pointed at by everyone like a clown. Her face gradually turned pale, her lips trembled, and she couldn't utter a word. Seeing her like this, Ning 1111 was very happy that her money was not wasted. Originally, she thought that it would be difficult to find weaknesses in a cold goddess like her who was gentle, tough, knowledgeable and praised by everyone, but she didn't expect that she actually lacked love. Knowing that she had hit the nail on the head, Ning 1111 crossed her arms and said confidently, "I have seen some people who lack love, but I have never seen a shameless woman like you who is thicker skinned than a city wall. I already know that you are my substitute in my second brother's heart, but you still cling to me. If I were you, I would have no face to live in this world and would have killed myself by banging my head against a wall." Ji Yushi tried her best to suppress those bad memories. After a while, she tried to explain, "What you said is my background, I can't change it. Miss Ning, I have already signed the divorce agreement." "Then why don't you go away?" Ning 1111 interrupted her impatiently and rolled her eyes. She hates people who say one thing and do another the most. "I've seen a lot of bitches like you. On the surface, the divorce agreement has been completed, but in fact, you keep delaying it. You don't even want to leave the Sai family, this cash cow. What about you? How much more noble are you than me for being a mistress to a married man?" Ji Yushi originally thought that the girl Sai Kaosen liked would at least be a reasonable person, but she never expected that she would be such a cunning villain who wanted every word to turn into a knife stabbing her heart. In that case, why should she save her face? Ji Yushi's eyes were cold at this moment, and he said sarcastically, "Ms. Ning just said that I am just a substitute for you in his heart. But have you ever thought that if it is true as you said, and you occupy such an important position in his heart, how can a person like him who is emotionally clean not keep his virginity for you?" Ning 1111 clenched her fingers tightly on the mattress beneath her body to prevent herself from jumping up. Her eyes widened with disbelief. "What did you say?" Ji Yushi didn't answer her, but looked at her steadily. "Also, I have already signed the divorce agreement. Now it's him who doesn't want a divorce, not me who doesn't want a divorce." With a bang, there was a loud noise behind me. Ji Yushi turned around and saw the kettle fell to the ground, spilling hot water all over the floor. Sai Kaosen was standing there with a gloomy face. She opened her mouth and wanted to explain, but those were all said by herself, so would it be any use to explain? Especially in front of his white moonlight. "Woo-woo, second brother, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have argued with Sister Wan about the variety show and second brother. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have wanted to take back something that no longer belongs to me." Ning 1111 had crawled from the bed to the window without knowing when. It was on the 18th floor, the window was still open, and she had already stepped one leg over it. Chapter 5, Divorce or Divorce. The wind made Ning 1111 shaky, like a delicate flower about to be picked. Sai Kaosen was too late to rescue her, so he could only say to Ji Yushi coldly, "Apologize to her." Ji Yushi pursed her lips and looked at him. It was clearly not her fault. She had also been in a car accident and couldn't be upset. "Second brother, don't blame me if you are angry. I'll be down right away." Ning 1111 came down from the windowsill, cried pitifully, and threw herself into Sai Cheshen's arms, her breath barely fading. However, she showed a smug smile from an angle where Sai Kaosen couldn't see. After seeing this scene, there was nothing she didn't understand. Because she doesn't love me, she did something wrong even if she did nothing wrong. Because he loves Ning 1111, even if she has done all kinds of bad things, he can still be very partial and let others apologize to her, as long as she is happy. But even though she loves him, she won't allow others to bully her. She took a deep breath and was about to retort, when suddenly a cold voice interrupted him. Are foreign countries so open now? A mistress can openly hug someone else's husband in front of the public and in front of the wife, and she can be so pretentious and make specious excuses. She turned around. Standing behind her was an elegant woman wearing a grey and black suit and a pair of 10-centimeter high heels. It was her mother-in-law, Qin Hua. She was stunned for a moment, then forced a smile. Mom. Qin Hua nodded at her, then she walked into the ward in high heels and came to Ning 1111's side. Mom, why are you here? Sai Kaosen asked in a deep voice. How dare you ask me why I'm here? I asked you to bring 1111 to the old house to celebrate, but I didn't ask you to bring her to the hospital on your own initiative. Qin Hua tore Ning 1111, who was still hanging on Sai Kaosen, away and threw her back onto the hospital bed like trash. Ning 1111 was caught off guard and lost her balance, and was about to fall. Sai Kaosen was close to her and subconsciously went to support her. Qin Hua immediately grabbed his hand. Sai Kaosen frowned slightly and withdrew his hand silently. Ning 1111 is the only daughter in the Ning family. She has been the apple of their eye since she was young. No one has ever dared to treat her like this since she was young. She was about to explode, but when she saw it was Qin Hua, she put on a cute and lovable smile, took Qin Hua's arm, and said affectionately, Auntie Tilda's second brother must have told you that I was sick and hospitalized, so he came to see me. You are so kind, Tilda. Qin Hua shook her hand away in disgust and rubbed the place that had just been touched. Ning 1111 was thick-skinned. She glanced at Sai Kaosen coquettishly and said, It's nothing serious. It's all my second brother's fault for making such a fuss that I was upset. I didn't know that Sister she was participating in that variety show. If Sister she likes it, then just give it to her. There's nothing to snatch away. Qin Hua was like hearing a huge joke. 1111 stole your things? She refused to accept the Sai shares I gave her earlier. What's more, it's a variety show. She walked to She took her hand and placed it in her palm. 1111, if you want to play in the future, just tell Mom, and I will open an entertainment company for you. You can play whatever you want. She was deeply touched. She didn't expect that her mother-in-law would appear in time to help her when she felt isolated and helpless. She pursed her lips and replied with a smile, Thank you, Mom. She didn't really want her mother-in-law to start a company for her, but since things had come to this, she had to go along with it and use this to anger Ning 1111. Qin Hua stroked her hair, his eyes full of affection. Why thank you? We are all family. Ning 1111 didn't hear anything, she only heard Qin Hua say that he would give She Sai shares. The Sai family is a leading enterprise in China. Not to mention how glorious the head office far away abroad is, even the equity of this domestic branch is not so easy to obtain. As far as she knew, even Mr. Sai, who held the largest number of shares in the Sai family, probably wouldn't dare to give away Sai family shares so casually. Not to mention that it was given to Shi, what a bitch. Watching the three of them leaving, Ning 1111 gritted her teeth in hatred. She had only been gone for a few years. And this bitch had already taken away what had belonged to her. At this time, Ning 1111's cell phone rang. It was a message from Sai Kaosen. Sai Kaosen, if you are not feeling well, you should rest more. Ning 1111 put away her phone, a smile appeared on the corner of her lips, and she lay back on the bed silently. What is the point of Qin Hua liking Shi so much? As long as Sai Kaosen still likes her, isn't he that enough? That bitch Shi, just wait. Inside the Maybach, Sai Kaosen drove with his eyes fixed forward. She sat in the passenger seat, looking at Qin Hua in the back seat, with a worried look on her face. Mom, you told Ashin that you had something urgent to talk to me about. What was it? Or was there something wrong with the physical examination? After all the commotion in the hospital, we only have time now to talk about this topic. It's okay, Mom is okay. Qin Hua patted her hands and comforted her. She asked anxiously, Are you really okay? She still remembered that when her mother was dying, she always said, "It's okay, it's okay." But when she saw her again, she was already terminally ill and died soon after. She didn't want her mother-in-law to be like this. Sai Kea-sen didn't say anything, but just watched silently in the rearview mirror. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law got along better than he did. Chin Hua looked at Ji Yushi's gradually moist eyes and felt heartbroken. She was about to say that it was really nothing, but when the words came to her lips, she remembered that what happened today might happen again in the future. Not to mention having grandchildren, even a good marriage would be broken up. Chin Hua held her forehead and leaned back with a headache. Ji Yushi saw that she was feeling unwell and poured her a glass of warm water. Chin Hua took a while to calm down after drinking, and then said, "It's not a big deal. You know, every time I have a banquet with people in the circle, one or two of them will always ask me why I don't have a grandson. When I hear that, I want to crawl into the ground." Ji Yushi was stunned. She had never expected her mother-in-law to suddenly say something like this, and her face turned red instantly. Before, Chaoshan gave up medicine to do business. When he first joined Sai's company, he had to learn everything from scratch. At that time, he was busy and you were still young. He thought we could talk about it later, so I never intervened. Now that he's not busy anymore and you've been married for 3 years, it's time to have a child. When the car arrived at the old house, Chin Hua opened the door and got out. He suddenly turned around and said, "From today on, you will all live in the old house. When 1111's stomach moves, you will go back." Sai Kea-sen tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his eyes deep and thoughtful. Ji Yushi placed her hand on her lower abdomen without leaving any trace. "Baby? She is pregnant. But unfortunately, Dad's sweetheart is not mom. Even if this marriage continues, it will only be in name only. It is better to let go early." Arshin. Sai Kea-sen fiddled with his phone without raising his head. Ji Yushi bit her lip, "We should still." Chapter 6, His Gentle Place. At this moment, Chin Hua suddenly came back and interrupted what Ji Yushi was about to say. "This is the 100-day banquet for your classmate's second child tomorrow night. I can't afford to lose face, but you young people can still lose face. Remember to go tomorrow." She pulled out 2 banquet invitations from her bag and slapped them into Sai Chaoshan's arms. Sai Kea-sen took it and turned to look at Ji Yushi. "What did you want to tell me just now?" The moonlight shone through the car window and onto him, making the already handsome and noble man look extra gentle. Her figure was now reflected in his affectionate eyes. He looks really good, and even now, she is still very attracted to him. Ji Yushi moved his lips but didn't say anything else. Sai Kea-sen stretched out his hand, curved his eyebrows, stroked the top of her hair, and said softly, "I thought about it, I was anxious today, it's my fault. It's getting late, go back and rest first." Ji Yushi hummed, opened the door and got out of the car, but so that the person behind her was still sitting in the car and had no intention of getting out. She asked hesitantly, "What about you? Aren't you going back with me?" Just then, Sai Chaoshan's screen lit up. She saw that it was a message from Ning 1111. Sai Kea-sen tugged at his tie and explained, "I'm a little tired, and I want to go relax." 2. The place that makes men most relaxed is the land of gentleness. Her heart was suddenly stung, and Ji Yushi forced a faint smile. "Then you should come back early." Since he didn't want her to know, she would just pretend not to know. Ji Yushi thought that with so many things happening, she would cry, make a fuss and not be able to sleep. But no, she was tired after a long day and fell asleep as soon as she entered the bedroom and got on the bed. A simple little face buried in the quilt, looking rosy as she sleeps, is particularly attractive. This was the scene that Sai Kea-sen saw when he came back. He couldn't help but reach out and touch her cheek, being so careful as if he was afraid of breaking it. His slender fingers gently brushed across her cheek. Feeling this gentle and familiar touch, even in deep sleep, Ji Yushi couldn't help but move closer and murmured, "R." In an instant, Sai Chaoshan's fingers froze and he felt as if struck by lightning. This is not the first time I have heard this name from Ji Yushi. At first he didn't pay much attention to it, but later, the name appeared more and more frequently. He asked the doctor, and it was a sequelae of the car accident. To put it bluntly, there was someone in her heart that she couldn't let go. Someone you can't let go of. Sai Kea-sen hid in the shadows, his eyes dim and lifeless. After a long time, a sigh escaped from his thin lips. The person she couldn't let go of had already returned home. They are about to get divorced, so she should be happy to be able to rekindle her relationship with the person she can't let go of, right? XX bar. We drank until 3 in the morning and were about to leave, but so that the person who had left and returned was suddenly stunned. Saikayasen ignored their surprise, picked up the wine glass on the table and started drinking without saying a word. He drank glass after glass of 50-proof vodka as if it were water, as if he would not stop until he had finished it. This frightened his brother Shenmu so much that he hurriedly tried to grab his wine glass. What happened? Is your sister-in-law angry with you because you came back late? In my impression, Ji Yuxi is a gentle and considerate person. They would get together in the past and chat for a long time, but I never heard her say anything. You didn't tell your sister-in-law that you were with us? I'll call your sister-in-law and explain. Saichashin's cell phone was in his coat pocket, and Shenmu tried to take it, but he didn't stop him. As soon as he pressed the unlock button, he saw the words Ning 1111 missed call on the screen. Have to. This is really a big problem. After sending everyone away, Shenmu sat next to Saikayasen again and called Ji Yuxi. Hello. Ji Yuxi was half asleep and didn't want to answer the call, but when she saw it was Saikayasen calling and he didn't say anything, she started to worry for no reason. Ashin, is there something wrong? Sudden. With a bang. The sound of glass breaking and a man falling down with a groan came from the phone. Ji Yuxi woke up instantly. She sat up from the bed and shouted hurriedly, Arshin? Arshin. What happened to you? Sister-in-law, is it sister-in-law? Brother Shin suddenly got drunk and went crazy. No one could stop him, in the XX bar. Okay, I'll be there right away. Ji Yuxi got up quickly and drove to the bar. Shenmu returned the phone to Saikayasen, stepped over the pile of broken glass and clinked glasses with him, raised his eyebrows and said, Sister-in-law will be there soon. As soon as he finished speaking, the man in front of him suddenly stood up and walked outside. Shenmu quickly pulled him to sit down, and said with a smile, It's only 5 minutes from your house to here. How could anything happen to your sister-in-law, who is already that old? Saichashin's brows relaxed slightly and he sat down again. After he asked the waiter to bring hangover soup and a suit, he stared at Shenmu and ordered, You smell like alcohol. 1111 doesn't like it. Shenmu pouted and said, Brother Shin, what do you want to achieve by saying this? When you heard that something happened to my sister-in-law's family, you left behind a business worth hundreds of millions and even offended people to run over and marry her. You have your sister-in-law in your heart, and she has you in her heart. You two should just live a good life. Why do you have to make both of you feel uncomfortable? It would have been fine if he was afraid that the smell of alcohol on his body would bother Ji Yuxi when she changed her clothes, but he was trying to ease the conflict between them, but in the end he was treated with disgust. Saikayasen half sank into the sofa, his eyes blurred. You don't understand. He could take advantage of the Ji family's bankruptcy and tie her to his side through marriage. But he couldn't bind her heart. Every time he saw her crying in her sleep and calling R, he felt suffocated. Since both of them are suffering, it is better to let go. But when she really signed the divorce agreement, he didn't want to let go even more. Okay, I don't understand. My sister-in-law will be here soon, and I won't interfere with your love. Shenmu said as he walked to the door, opened it, and happened to meet the waiter who was bringing sobering soup. He stepped aside to let the waiter pass first, and said to the man in the corner, Remember to bring your sister-in-law to my son's 100-day banquet tomorrow. It's too late, so I'm leaving now. Saikayasen waved his hand. The moment the box door closed, the waitress came in. She twisted her slender waist and slowly walked to Saikayasen with her long white legs. She was wearing a mask, with only the upper half of her face showing, but you could still tell how charming she was. Especially under the dim light, her eyes were sending sparks to men without blinking. Saikayasen said with great disgust, Put it down and get out. The waiter turned a deaf ear and sat down next to him. With her slender, white fingers, she lifted the lid of the sobering soup and scooped a spoonful, then she leaned against Saikayasen and put the soup into her mouth. Brother, try a tilde. This statement is full of double entendres and hints. Chapter 7, Suspecting Someone. Saikayasen frowned, his eyes were so cold that they could freeze someone to death. Get out. The waitress sensed the man's anger, and she blinked and moved closer, reaching out to take off her mask, and said delicately, Second brother, it's me. Except for the lips and eyes, her face is almost exactly the same as Ji Yuxi's. It's Ning 1111. After Shenmu left, there were only two of them left in the box, and a dim, alcoholic atmosphere lingered in the box. Saikayasen moved his body further away and said coldly, "Why are you running here instead of staying in the hospital to take good care of yourself? Go back quickly and don't let your parents worry." Having said that, he called Ning's mother directly. Ning 1111 stopped him and said, "I called my second brother several times but he didn't answer. So many things happened today, he is worried about you." She stuck out her tongue, then leaned over and pushed the spoon toward Saikayasen. "Drink a little, just drink a little Tilder, I also want to take care of my second brother Tilder." She held the handle of the spoon very low, so whenever Saikayasen tried to drink, his thin lips would inevitably touch her fingers. As Saikayasen gradually reached out, Ning 1111's face became filled with excitement. "My heart is pounding. Finally. She and Saikayasen will be closer." Suddenly, Saikayasen turned in mid-air to take the hangover soup in her other hand. He didn't even touch her hand. No need to bother. Saikayasen tilted his head back and drank the sobering soup in one gulp. Ning 1111 felt extremely lost in an instant, and she pouted slightly, looking unhappy. Looking at the bowl of hangover soup that she had drunk up completely, she curled her lips secretly. The process is not important, what is important is. He drank the hangover soup. Ning 1111 raised her eyes and met his sexy Adam's apple rolling up and down. She slowly stuck out her tongue and rolled up all the remaining hangover soup in the spoon into her mouth. After drinking every drop, she licked it again. "Second brother, how do you feel?" The two of them had been sitting for a while, and Saikayasen felt his mouth getting more and more dry. He raised his hand to unbutton a few buttons before he felt better. "How did you get here? I'll ask your driver to take you back." "No, I don't want to. I haven't seen second brother for a long time, and I want to spend some sweet time with him. Don't you miss me, Tilder?" Ning 1111's eyes were full of affection, her cheeks were rosy, she hooked his tie and was about to kiss him. Ning 1111 was getting closer and closer, and Saikayasen reached out and pushed her. But he didn't know what was wrong with him. He felt numb all over and didn't realize it, so he didn't push her away. Bang! Just then, the door opened and a woman hurried in stood outside. The woman's fair and rosy face showed panic, and even though her hair was a little messy, it couldn't hide her beauty. Especially, those beautiful eyes were full of worry. 1111. She didn't expect to see such a scene when he came here in a hurry. Ning 1111 had half of her body hanging on him, while Saikayasen was staring at the pretty girl in his arms with a flushed face. If she had come a little later, she might have done it here. Ning 1111 blinked her eyes with lust and waved at her deliberately. "Well, Sister Ji, you're here. Come and sit next to me, Tilder." The strong smell of alcohol and the luxurious atmosphere in the box made Ji, who had just rushed in from the cold wind, feel out of place. "Sorry for interrupting." Ji couldn't stay any longer, so he left this sentence and turned around and ran away. The slender figure disappeared at the door. Saikayasen's heart sank and he pushed Ning 1111 away with force. Without paying any attention to the cries of the woman behind him who was hit, he stood up and chased after her like a shadow. "No. Can't leave. She will die if she leaves." Ning 1111 reached out to grab Saikayasen but found nothing. Her eyes were strangely red as she looked at the empty doorway, and her body felt extremely empty. Her legs couldn't help but tremble, her plump breasts rose and fell as she gasped and screamed, "Someone come!" She walked slowly on the street, the wind made her feel a little dazed. She thought something had happened to Saikayasen, so she ran over in worry, but he already had someone to accompany him. Drunk and crazy. So this is what it means to be drunk. He just looked at Ning 1111 with such emotion. Once upon a time, he looked at her like this on the bed. Sure enough, a stand-in is a stand-in. As soon as the Real owner comes back, all his love for her as a substitute will be taken away, not a single bit will be left for her. And she still foolishly loved him with all her heart and couldn't let him go. Saikayasen followed Ji from a distance. He knew that no one would listen to anything he said now, so he had to let her calm down first. When he saw her trying to stop a taxi, he strode over and stuffed her into his car. In the car, the two were silent. Saikayasen looked at her with red eyes and explained in a low voice, "I want to tell you, today I won't. I have something to tell you, too." Just now, Ji thought a lot. Since he didn't love her, she had to ask her what to do with the baby in her belly. I can't keep it a secret forever. What if my belly gets noticed? The faint light of morning rose and shone through the car window onto Yuan Wan. She came out in a hurry and wore a sweater over her pajamas. She looked so soft and gentle, but when her almond-shaped eyes looked at him, they were no longer gentle, but firm. He didn't like this look. But he didn't know it now, it was a mother's perseverance. When he knew it later, he regretted it deeply. Saikayasen was panicking. He reached out and held her in his arms, his cold voice trembling with a hint of trembling. Don't say it. I don't want to hear it. He is afraid. I'm afraid that the woman who is sleeping next to me will call out another man's name. She was stunned. Has he reached the point where he doesn't even want to listen? The sky was turning pale, illuminating the people in the car clearly, but Jiyushi's eyes gradually dimmed, and she slowly and desperately pushed Saikayasen away. You pushed me away so hastily. Have you had another man in your heart during the 3 years you've been married to me? Saikayasen could no longer suppress his emotions, and stared at Jiyushi's eyes with his bloodshot eyes, as if he wanted to see through her heart and see who was in her heart. Is that so? Jiyushi laughed angrily. She just pushed him away, and she was suspected of having someone else in her heart. What about him? Just now, he was cuddling with Ninga 1111 in the box, and he got drunk and asked her to come and see it with her own eyes. Who has someone else in his heart? Things have come to this point, and I suddenly feel that there is no need to get angry anymore. There is no trust between husband and wife anymore. All she has to do now is eat well, drink well, sleep well, have fun, and take good care of herself and the baby in her belly. As for his attitude towards the child, she didn't need to care. Jiyushi leaned back and stopped arguing. Go back. Saikayasen originally wanted to take this opportunity to ask that person if he was her ex-boyfriend, but looking at her tired face, he finally couldn't bear it and asked the driver to drive back. Jiyushi lay on the bed, very tired but unable to fall asleep. She stared at the slender figure as he took off his clothes. The man had broad shoulders and a narrow waist, and his beautiful abdominal muscles and mermaid line could be seen through the frosted glass. Chapter 8, How Can I Help You? She turned over and stopped looking. Suddenly, a male voice seemed to explode beside his ears. Jiyushi was awakened, turned over and saw Saikayasen kneeling on the ground with his back bent, breathing heavily. An adult would understand what he was doing, but it sounded different from usual. Something was wrong. She got out of bed and opened the bathroom door. Saikayasen raised his head in response, his messy hair soaked with sweat and stuck to his forehead. His whole body was red like a cooked shrimp, and beads of sweat were oozing out of his skin, which looked extremely abnormal. Jiyushi took the towel beside him and squatted down to wipe his sweat. What's wrong with you? Saikayasen tried to avoid her touch, but he couldn't help looking at her round body under her pajamas. He gritted his teeth and uttered a few words incoherently. Don't come over here. I won't be able to control myself and hurt you. When Jiyushi understood, her face instantly turned red, but she heard his voice was already hoarse. Obviously he had reached his limit, and asked worriedly, then, how can I help you? Is there an antidote? Where is it? I'll go find it. Saikayasen grabbed Jiyushi's wrist, his eyes full of desire. Jiyushi was startled by the heat of his palm and quickly refused. No, we are getting divorced. She is still pregnant. What if the child will be hurt? Saikayasen's eyes darkened, his Adam's apple rolled up and down. He gritted his teeth and pinched her palm. After Jiyushi understood, she nodded half shyly and half annoyed. An hour later, the two of them were lying in bed. Saikayasen stared at her pink cheeks, pinched them, and said in a hoarse voice, the bar was an accident. I didn't expect her to come. Just now, with the lights on, Saikayasen in that situation made her feel both exciting and powerful. Even now his hands are still shaking, and he is really embarrassed at the moment. Jiyushi turned over and buried his head in the quilt, saying in a muffled voice, that's really a combination. After what happened, I more or less believed that there was nothing wrong with them. Otherwise, why would he chase me back and why would he vent his anger like that? You have a good rest. I'm going to the company. Looking at the bulge on the bed, Saikayasen remembered her unwillingness in the bathroom. Feeling a little disappointed, he got up, changed his clothes and left. At the same time, Ning 1111 was taken to the hospital. After a night of tossing and turning, she stared at the ceiling with dark eyes and pounded the bed with gritted teeth. Jiyushi, that bitch, if she hadn't come over suddenly, I would have succeeded. All right, if you get angry again, you'll really have to take medicine. Ning's mother peeled a slice of orange and stuffed it into her mouth. If it doesn't work this time, there will be next time. Why are you in such a hurry? Ning 1111 chewed it and swallowed it, then said angrily, Mom, you weren't there at the time and you didn't know at all. Second brother had obviously thought about it, but when that bitch stood at the door, he hurriedly pushed me away with all his might, as if he was afraid that she would misunderstand him. It's obvious that a poor bitch is not even as good as a finger of mine. How could he care about her so much? I don't know where he got the energy from. He was able to chase after her soberly even though he was using it for animals. Did he love her so much? Besides, she looked so much like Ji Yushi, how could he tell them apart at that time? Mother Ning stroked Ning 1111's long hair and said earnestly, Why are you in such a hurry? Good things take time. Besides, it's all your fault that you insisted on going out with a foreigner and almost died in his bed. Now that you're back and he wants a divorce, it means there's still a chance. Take your time. Ning 1111's eyes rolled around, and a plan came to her mind. She picked up her phone and sent a message to Sai Chaos-hen. The corners of her mouth curled up into a smile. Mom, you're right. Ji Yushi had a good sleep, and when she woke up she saw a message from Sai Chaos-hen, saying that he would come back to pick her up to attend the 100-day banquet. In fact, her family had a driver specially assigned to her, but she still felt sweet in her heart and got up to pack. Soon, Sai Chaos-hen called. Arshan, you're here already. I'll be down right away. Ji Yushi walked over briskly with a smile in her eyes, opened the car door, and when she saw someone sitting in the passenger seat, the smile on her face gradually faded. The person sitting in the passenger seat is petite and pitiful, with an oval face and a pointed chin. Who else could it be but Ning 1111? Sister Ji Yushi, I was coming and second brother didn't let me move away. I'm sorry Tilda, Ning 1111 said with pride on her face. It was obviously intentional, but the excuse he made was very reasonable. Ji Yushi subconsciously looked at Sai Chaos-hen. He sat in the driver's seat and seemed to be unaware of what was happening. He just said, Get in the car first. Ji Yushi gripped the car door handle, feeling extremely sad. They had been so intimate in the bathroom and beside the bed in the morning, but now he was sitting there cold and indifferent, as if the person who had been intimate with her before was not him at all. She originally wanted to leave, but when she thought of her mother-in-law, she calmed down, opened the back door and got in. That's right, when they said they would come to pick her up, they didn't say they would pick her up alone. Ning 1111 was so proud of herself as if she had won a battle. She turned around and started chatting and laughing with Sai Chaos-hen about her childhood. Ji Yushi didn't want to listen, and looked sideways at the scenery outside the window, but his eyes gradually became misty. Sai Chaos-hen saw it from the rearview mirror and whispered with concern, Are you feeling unwell? No, I feel fine after taking the medicine. Ji Yushi was staring at the scenery outside the car at this moment, and she didn't know that Sai Chaos-hen was asking her. Ning when she deliberately rushed to answer, apologetically, Second brother, Sister Ji Yushi, I'm really sorry for what happened yesterday. I really didn't know there would be those things in there. Take good care of yourself and don't think about those messy things. Sai Chaos-hen said without any emotion. It's not like he didn't suspect Ning 1111 about what happened yesterday. But the hangover soup has been handled by many people, so there is no guarantee that they may not be business rivals, and the assistant has not yet found out what is fishy. Ning 1111 sat up straight with the attitude of a winner, with pride on her face. Ji Yushi closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. Rather than arguing with her and getting into trouble, he might as well pretend he didn't hear it. What's more, she couldn't do her contrived look. After getting off the car, Ning 1111 looked at the two people walking in front of her with her legs in an awkward position. Second brother, Sister Ji Yushi, why don't you go first? I'm going to the toilet. Sai Chaos-hen frowned and looked at him. Can you do it by yourself? Ning 1111 nodded. If she didn't leave separately from them, how could she cause trouble? Sai Chaos-hen watched her go into the bathroom and then walked to Ji Yushi. Let's go in. Just took 2 steps. Beside her, Sai Chaos-hen suddenly leaned towards her. He bent his arms and signaled with his eyes, We are husband and wife, you should hold my arm and go in. Thinking of what just happened in the car, Ji Yushi felt a little reluctant. Chapter 9, Banquet Incident. But on second thought, no matter what, he is still my husband now. Why can Ning 1111 pretend to be weak and get close to him to make her angry, but she can't? Ji-yu-shi raised her eyes and looked at the man's gentle and handsome face. It has to be said that Sai Chaos-hen had some capital. She no longer hesitated, put her hand in his arm, held her head high and walked into the banquet like a queen. The two of them quickened their pace, and at this moment, his cell phone rang. It was the assistant calling. The assistant was very clear about his work schedule, and the sudden call must be about something important. Sai Chaos-hen pulled his hand back. Go in and wait for me first. Good. The banquet hall was abuzz with light, and all the guests here were well-known figures in City A. However, compared with Sai Chaos-hen, these people were not as impressive as him. As they entered, the quiet conversations died down, and all eyes were on the woman who had just entered. The woman was wearing a classic low-key suit from Chanel. Her figure was exquisite and her noble temperament was the kind that no one present had ever seen. It was obvious at first glance that she was a distinguished guest specially invited by the host family. The women present stared at the woman with jealousy like poisonous snakes. The men, single or married, kept their eyes on her as if they had spotted a prey that only appeared once in 1,000 years, and asked each other about this woman's background. If they are not up to standard, they can play however they want. Although they are not as good as Sai Chaos-hen, they are of noble status after all, and a woman can still play with them as she pleases. At this moment, a woman in the crowd suddenly ran towards Ji-yu-shi, who was being stared at by everyone. She said in a very familiar tone, 1111, I never thought that you would marry Sai Chaos-hen. This sentence is like hot oil dropped into cold water, causing an explosion. Everyone was shocked. They had not expected that this top-notch girl was already taken, and that he was taken by someone as powerful as Sai Chaos-hen. Suddenly, they felt heart-wrenchingly uncomfortable. If it were anyone else, they could rob, but with the Sai family's background, they couldn't even compare to their toes. Except for young Master Shu who had the capital to compete, the others who came here today did not even have the qualifications to compete. It was a pity that they gave up thinking about it, and looked at Ji-yu-shi with a little more respect. Ji-yu-shi nodded blankly, but she didn't remember that she had such an old classmate. The woman pretended to be angry. What's wrong? We were the best friends in school. You can't just turn your back on us after you get our school hunk. At this time, the girls who were gossiping with the woman also came over quickly. After looking Ji-yu-shi up and down, they said, What? You said this is Ji-yu-shi? I was wondering why she looked so familiar. She must be our class beauty. How come you've become so beautiful now? I can hardly recognize you. The identity of alumni brought them closer together, and everyone was not as reserved as before when standing next to such a rare beauty. Ji-yu-shi was even more confused. Although they didn't keep in touch with their college classmates, it was not possible that they didn't know any of them, right? Did they recognize the wrong person? Just as Ji-yu-shi was about to explain, a female voice interrupted, Lin Ning, look how scared you guys are of Sister Ji-yu-shi. When Lin Ning heard that the person in front of him was called Ji-yu-shi, his face instantly fell. He let go of his hand and walked towards Ning 1111. Ning 1111 and Sai Chaos-hen stood side by side at the entrance of the banquet. The woman was delicate and the man was gentle and dignified, which was particularly pleasing to the eye. Only. Everyone looked left and right, looking at two women who looked almost identical, one gentle and the other beautiful. In comparison, Ning 1111 was at a disadvantage. But so what? After all, she is Sai Chaos-hen's wife now. My eyesight is really bad. I recognized the wrong person. Lin Ning apologized falsely. The two exchanged glances while talking, and Ning 1111 secretly curled her lips. She was very satisfied with Lin Ning's move. Sai Chaos-hen never spent any energy on insignificant people. As soon as he came in, he looked around and saw a lonely person, like a poor abandoned child. His heart softened and he took a step forward to walk over. Ning 1111 had finally been so glorious in front of her classmates, how could she let him go at this time? It happened that she was still a little unsteady after being beaten by someone last night, and her body tilted and fell towards Sai Chaos-hen. He subconsciously reached out to catch her. Are you okay? Looking at the handsome face so close, she shook her head shyly. Second brother, I'm fine, let's go in together. Sai Chaos-hen nodded and followed her. Sai Chaos-hen just thought she was uncomfortable, so he helped her up like a gentleman, just to lend a hand. But it was not the same when he was in front of the crowd who were unaware and had just been deliberately led. In their few memories, Master Sire had never been seen to favor anyone. He would even walk away when a girl spoke to him. He was extremely arrogant and cold. Although he used to be close to Ning 1111, they could also see that he was not very interested in her. Now he is married to Ning 1111 and he is considerate to her in front of everyone. They are so jealous. You're already married, how can you still call me second brother? Lin Ning stood on the other side of Ning 1111. If you keep calling me that, everyone will think Ji Yushi is Mr. Sai's wife. That's right, we just admitted our mistake. Sai Chaos-en frowned and wanted to refute, but when he thought of Ruan Wan's distrust after his explanation in the morning, he took the wine glass handed to him by someone, pretended not to hear, and started talking to the person. He actually wanted to see what her attitude was. 1111, I tell you to watch out. Mr. Sai is a man of few words, but some women just come at him when they smell his scent. Everyone knew who these words were addressed to, but the person being humiliated did not feel embarrassed at all. Instead, Ning 1111 showed embarrassment on her face. Acting like a green tea girl and seducing a married woman like a shitty plaster, isn't this what Ning 1111 is talking about? Lin Ning didn't notice it for a moment and kept talking. But this is not Lin Ning's fault. It was Ning 1111 who concealed some of the truth when she asked Lin Ning for help. Ji Yushi understood that what happened today was a trap set for her by Ning 1111 and Lin Ning. But she didn't expect to shoot herself in the foot. Turning around, Ji Yushi picked out some exquisite and beautiful pastries, found a perfect spot to sit down, and started eating in silence. She had hardly eaten anything from yesterday to today, so it was nice to have a delicious dessert and watch a farce. She touched her belly and said to herself, "Baby, don't you think so? Didn't you eat?" A familiar deep male voice interrupted her ear. She looked up and saw it was Sai Chaos-en. Ji Yushi felt a little panicked, not knowing whether he heard the word baby. Chapter 10, Crazy Face Slapping. He hummed awkwardly and lowered his head to continue eating dessert. From Luo Saichaoshan's perspective, she was in a bad mood. When I'm in a bad mood, I want to eat dessert, and when I'm in a bad mood, I don't want to pay attention to him. The only thing that could make her angry was what she just said, which meant that he actually had a place in her heart and she would be jealous and angry because of him. He couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth. You have a bad stomach, so eat less sweets. If you want to eat anything, I'll make it for you. He would cook occasionally, but that was only when he felt like it. The hand holding the dessert spoon froze, and Ji Yushi smiled bitterly in his heart. Was he so happy that these people thought he and Ning 1111 were a couple? She wanted to say no, but the words changed to snail noodles. We are at someone else's party, how can we eat such smelly food? Ning 1111 came over at some point and gave a concerned reminder. Oh my god. 1111, you don't blame her for ordering your husband around and thinking about her like this. You can't be so generous. Otherwise, she will ride on your head. Lin Ning said angrily. Some women are just shameless. They dare to flirt and seduce others even when their wives are still here. I advise you to give up on it as soon as possible, otherwise someone will tear your clothes off and drag you out on the street by your hair to show you how slutty you are. Ruan Wan had tolerated Ning 1111's mischief from the moment she got in the car until now. She thought that as long as she ignored her, she would always be bored. She didn't expect that she would really treat her as a soft persimmon. Ji Yushi put down the spoon, and in front of everyone, she imitated Ning 1111's green tea look, raised her beautiful eyes and stared at the man, and said softly and sweetly, "What do you think, husband?" She was pretty to begin with, and she was usually quiet and non-competitive, which made her particularly attractive. Not to mention that she was now looking at him with her watery eyes, and her little finger was rubbing his palm in a very uncouth manner. Saichaoshan's voice suddenly became hoarse for no reason. He raised his hand and stroked the top of her head before forcing himself to suppress the throbbing. Okay, I'll go by it. Everyone looked at Saichaoshan's quick and decisive back as he left, their mouths wide open. What's going on? At this moment, all the inquiring and contentious looks were cast on Ning 1111, and she was almost angry. She had clearly tested Saichaoshan's attitude just now, and seeing that he was silent and unwilling to intervene, she dared to take the initiative. After all, it was a matter between women. Who would have thought that he would cook for a cheap bitch in front of such a prominent person? He had to buy it for her even though she didn't want to eat it. She looked at Saichaoshan's disappeared figure, feeling jealous and resentful. Not only did he help her out just now, but he also condescended to buy something for that bitch himself for such a trivial matter that could be easily assigned to an errand boy or ordering takeout. He had never treated her like this since she was a child. It turns out to be a misunderstanding after all this fuss. I'm so sorry. The people who were originally surrounding Ning 1111 now stood next to Ji Yushi, looking at her like the moon surrounded by stars, and they were all afraid that Sai Chaos-en would make trouble when he came back. I just felt that Madame Sai was different. She was calm even when someone threw mud at her. She wasn't like someone who deliberately said something ambiguous to cause us to misunderstand. Lin Ning was so embarrassed that she could hardly stay here any longer. She reached out and tugged at Ning 1111, whispering, "What's going on? Didn't you say that Master Sai wouldn't care?" "How should I know? Ning 1111 still has some status in the circle, so no matter how embarrassing it is, few people dare to target her openly." She was so angry that she looked at the bitch and said, "Sister Jiyu, she is worthy of being the daughter of the Jiyu family. Her methods are really powerful." Jiyu family? Is it the Jiyu family that once faced bankruptcy and wanted to sell their daughter for fame? Lin Ning said. It should be correct. I remember when the Jiyu family came to ask for help, they mentioned this name and even emphasized that it was the creek, which means there is a lot of water to play with. Everyone looked at Ji Yushi with contempt, while others regretted their decision. I thought her father was just exaggerating, but I didn't expect her daughter to be so beautiful. If Ji Yushi had shown up at that time, maybe I could have helped her. In an instant, he sighed and looked at Ji Yushi with eyes full of regret. Ning 1111 curled the corners of her mouth, waiting to see her panic like she did in the hospital. She just didn't believe it. With so many people here talking about her original family, how could she not collapse? If that way can keep her under my feet, then a few days will also be fine. Ji Yushi slowly stood up while holding onto the table, and brushed away the hair that fell on her neck, saying elegantly and generously, "Since everyone knows this, they should understand that I am not only the daughter of Gu's family, but also the wife of the person in charge of Sai's family." She looked around and said, "You are all smart people, so watch your mouths. The power of pillow talk should not be underestimated. Don't let yourselves end up worse off than I did. That would be bad." Ever since Ning 1111 caught him off guard with such words in the hospital, Ji Yushi knew that it was useless to explain to people like them. It would be better to simply and rudely use the powerful Sai family to put pressure on them. Now it seems that fighting violence with violence is very effective. At this time, Ning 1111 gave Lin Ning a look, and she said, 1111, I heard that she not only stole Mr. Sai but also stole your variety show. Is that true? Now that the situation has come to this, Ning 1111 doesn't even need to say anything. Just pretending to be pitiful is enough to make people think that Ji Yushi is bullying others. After all, among all the women sitting here, who hasn't had a crush on Sai Chaos-en? Their family backgrounds are much better than Ji Yushi's, but now Sai Chaos-en has married such a slut who is not presentable. They must be furious when they compare themselves. To be honest, this is really too much. Just because the Sai family is behind it, can they do whatever they want? You think you can turn into a phoenix by hooking up with Sai? What a fantasy. 1111, don't be too sad. People like her are destined not to last long. Maybe Mr. Sai will divorce her one day. There will always be someone to take care of her, don't worry. Ji Yushi sneered and was about to retort when a gentle male voice came from behind her. Ms. Ning is really not a good person. It was clearly you who quit the show and acted like a big shot. Why are you blaming Ji Yushi who cleaned up the mess for you? The man had a gentle temperament, with the light behind him, and walked slowly with long legs. He was none other than Shu Hesi, the classmate who participated in the dating variety show with him that day. Shu Hesi walked to Ji Yushi and stopped, looking at her silly look, as if asking her why he came. His heart was slightly moved, and he felt that she looked the same as when he first met her in college. Gentle and shy, which made him extra attractive. After a few seconds, Shu Hesi came back to his senses. Why don't we just call the director of the show? As he spoke, he took out his phone and unlocked it. Chapter 11, Which word? Ning 1111 knew that her words were untenable, so she could only grit her teeth and glare at Ji Yushi. I never thought that Sister Ji Yushi is so popular with men. I just don't know if second brother knows that you are like this. She left this sentence and picked up her bag and moved aside. Everyone was whispering, and their eyes were already looking at Ji Yushi strangely, but Shu Hesi was here, so even if they wanted to call Guan Ji Yushi a slut, they didn't dare, so they had to disperse. At this time, Shu Hesi looked at Ji Yushi's slightly haggard face and said, I asked you earlier if you were doing well. Was it because of her that you didn't answer me? Ji Yushi lowered his eyes and didn't answer, nor did he show any expression. If Ning 1111 hadn't set a trap today, she would never have taken the initiative to reveal her relationship with Sai Chaos-hen in public. I've noticed that you look a little haggard recently. You should pay more attention to your health and get enough nutrition. Seeing her silence, Shu Hesi changed the subject calmly. He is not in a hurry. He will be filming the dating variety show in the next period of time anyway, and they will gradually become familiar with each other. What's more, the couple is so cold towards each other, this marriage is about to end. Even though he had missed 3 years, he still had some patience. Take your time and don't rush. Ji Yushi was shocked. Her health had not been very good after the car accident, but was it so obvious now? There was nothing wrong with her, the most important thing was the baby, and her hand subconsciously rested on her lower abdomen. Shu Hesi took in all her movements, then withdrew his gaze without leaving a trace and handed over his WeChat QR code. If you have any inconvenience or discomfort, you can come to me. Ji Yushi went back and searched for Shu Hesi last time, and found out that he was quite capable in obstetrics and gynecology, so she added him without hesitation. She smiled gently, I'm so sorry. I bothered you last time and I'm bothering you again today. I may have to bother you in the future. Shu Hesi pinned her WeChat to the top of his list, then put it in his pocket and stared at her face for a while. Nothing, just a piece of cake. Shenmu had just finished coaxing his baby and came out of the room yawning. From a distance he saw Ji Yushi and a man sitting very close to each other, talking and laughing. He looked around but didn't see Sai Chaos-hen, so he immediately took out his phone and said, Hey, brother Shen, where are you? Come back soon. My sister-in-law is getting close to a man, and they seem to be having a good chat. Sai Chaos-hen felt that it was not that serious. He was not so paranoid as to not allow her to communicate normally with men. What's more, having been married to Ji Yushi for many years, her character does not allow her to do anything out of line. He trusted her. His eyes fell on the fresh snail noodles that he had bought after queuing for a long time. When he thought of Ji Yushi's happy expression while eating the snail noodles, he couldn't help but speed up. Then, he asked casually, Do you know what that man's name is? I think his name is Shu Hesi. There was a screech. The sound of sudden braking. The car suddenly stopped in the middle of the road. Sai Chaos-hen clenched his phone tightly, ignoring the shouts of the car owners behind him, and asked in a stern voice, Which word is it? Shenmu had no idea why he was so obsessed with the word he. He just thought it was a man's natural possessiveness towards a woman. Well, I'll hold on here first, and you come back quickly. Especially someone like Sai Chaos-hen, who used improper means to marry Ji Yushi. At this moment, Ji Yushi was asking Shu Hesi about the fetus. Shenmu squeezed in between the two of them and said, Sister-in-law, I have to go out to do something suddenly. The babysitter has asked for leave. There are so many people at the banquet and I don't have anyone to trust. Can you please take care of my little son for me? Ji Yushi originally wanted to refuse, but when she saw their baby lying quietly in the cradle, a pair of big grape-like eyes staring at her without blinking, the little hands waving in the air, and the little mouth pouting and babbling, no one knew what he was shouting. Ji Yushi hurriedly stuffed the stuffed doll into his hand, but the next second, it was thrown away. She used a pacifier to coax him, but he refused. Only when she gently held his little hand did the little baby grin and giggle at her. In an instant, Ji Yushi was melted by cuteness. She moved her hand to her lower abdomen and slowly rubbed it through the clothes. She wondered, when her baby was born, would he also hold her hand, and when he grew up a little, would he call her mom and Sai Chaos-hen dad? The image of Sai Chaoshen's cold look when he found out she was pregnant emerged in her mind, and her heart sank instantly. You are such a scumbag. A substitute wants to have a child to maintain the marriage. The sarcastic words suddenly rang out in the quiet room. Ji Yushi turned around and saw that it was Ning 1111. She couldn't help but frowned. Ning 1111 quickly took 2 steps at a time to get to Ji Yushi's side. Caught off guard, she stretched out her hand and poked the baby's face with her freshly made sharp nails. Ji Yushi was quick to pick up the baby and hold it in his arms. I don't know how much strength Ning 1111 used, but her sharp nails pierced directly into the back of her hand. In an instant, blood was flowing. Ji Yushi was in so much pain that tears welled up in her eyes. The baby in her arms was suddenly frightened and started crying loudly. She didn't care about the piercing pain on the back of her hand and hurriedly tried to comfort the baby. At this time, the nanny ran in hurriedly. When she saw the blood on the white carpet and the little master crying heartbreakingly, she immediately took the child from Ji Yushi's arms and examined him carefully. After making sure that the little master was not injured, she looked at Ji Yushi with a vigilant look. This is to determine that she wants to harm the child. Ji Yushi wanted to explain, but the nanny didn't even give her a chance to say a word and just carried the child out. Ning 1111 was very satisfied with the result. Ji Yushi, you'd better ask for a divorce from your second brother as soon as possible, otherwise I guarantee that this will happen again. Seeing Ji Yushi wanting to refute, she said indifferently, I am the apple of the Ning family's eye, and I am also the future granddaughter-in-law acknowledged by Grandpa Sai himself. Even if I do something outrageous, the Ning family and the Sai family will help me settle it. As for you, She pulled out a check from her Gucci handbag and said, while I'm in a good mood, hurry up and get the money, divorce me and get out. Otherwise, if you make me angry, I won't even pay you for being my substitute for the past 3 years. Ning 1111 handed the check to Ji Yushi again, and when she saw that she didn't want to take it, she threw it on the ground. When Ji Yushi saw the 3 million written on the check, he laughed instantly. Ms. Ning thinks too little of herself. What do you mean? It's nothing. I just think that Miss Ning kept saying that I was your stand-in for 3 years, but in the end I only gave her such a small amount of money. Ji Yushi picked up the check and said slowly. Ning 1111 looked at Ji Yushi and sneered, I thought you were so noble, but you just think it's not enough. As she spoke, she took out a few checks from her bag and threw them at Ji Yushi. Chapter 12, His Choice. Checks were thrown around. Time passed by little, and Ji Yushi still had no intention of picking it up. Ning 1111 suddenly got angry. Ji Yushi, don't take yourself too seriously. To put it bluntly, you are just a salesman. Why are you pretending to be so noble in front of me? You have a face exactly like mine so that you can stay with your second brother cleanly and without any status. If it weren't for me and my second brother, you don't know how many times you would have been fucked by thousands of people over the years. She just wanted to provoke Ji Yushi, and it would be best if she could get excited and do something. If her second brother saw the slap mark on her face, he would definitely hate Ji Yushi even more, and the divorce would be even closer. Thinking of this, and fearing that he would not be miserable enough by then, he poured himself a cup of very hot water and placed it next to Ji Yushi's hand. As long as she gets excited, she will splash water on herself. But Ji Yushi didn't. She said calmly, you are right in one thing. I do want to thank Sai Chaos-hen. If it weren't for him, the Jiyu family would have gone bankrupt and lived on the streets, and there would not be the glory it has today. As for whether it is a substitute or not, Sai Chaos-hen has already given me half of all the property under his name and the shares of Sai Corporation he holds in the divorce agreement. This was completely beyond Ning 1111's expectations. The Sai family has taught us since childhood that profit is the most important thing. Even Qin Hua, who has a strong family background, didn't get many shares when she married into the Sai family. But Ji Yushi not only married into the Sai family without any money, but also the Jiyu company was built up by her second brother with money and effort. Why should she be given so much property after the divorce? Ning 1111 was so angry that her teeth were itching. I only worked as a stand-in for 3 years and got half of the property. I also made it onto the rich list with this property. Do you think I still care whether a man loves me or not? Ji Yushi threw the check in Ning 1111's face and said, as for the money you gave me, I don't even care about it. In an instant, Ning 1111 became angry and grabbed Ji Yushi's sleeve. You can get so much money because you are my substitute. Write me a property gift certificate now. Otherwise, don't even think about returning with everything intact. Just as he finished speaking, a figure suddenly jumped out from behind, grabbed Ning 1111's hair, and slapped her hard in the face left and right. Ning 1111 was stunned by several heavy slaps on the face. Her face, which had just had hyaluronic acid injected, had not yet been completely absorbed, and was now swollen and painful, as if it was about to explode. She had been a spoiled jewel in the palm of her hand since she was young. She had bodyguards to protect her when she went out and men to flatter her. No one had ever hit her like this before. She fought back immediately but had no chance of winning and was beaten up badly instead. Both of his eyes were swollen from being hit, leaving only a small slit to see people. If Shu Hesi, a grown man, hadn't been so reluctant to interfere in the affairs of two women, and had told Tang Ning too late, she would have come earlier and Ji Yuxi wouldn't have been bullied like this. Tang Ning protected Ji Yuxi behind her like she was protecting her own child. You keep calling people sluts, but you couldn't help but spread your legs in the private room and begged the man to do that thing with you. Didn't you mention how slutty you are? The couple haven't even divorced yet, but you don't want to be the eldest daughter of the Ning family, but to be a mistress for a married man. You're addicted to being a mistress and you're still pointing fingers here. Aren't you a slut? Ning 1111's face turned red and white. She suppressed her guilty conscience and said calmly, "What nonsense are you talking about? Do you have any evidence? Just spread rumors and slander me like this. Believe it or not, I will sue you for defamation. Is it still called rumor mongering when there is evidence?" Tang Ning glanced at her disdainfully, then pulled out a WeChat group message from her phone and clicked on a video to show her. In the video, a woman with red cheeks and screaming in revealing clothes was tearing her clothes, which did not have much fabric on them, in pain. A man happened to pass by at this moment, so she crawled over and wrapped herself around him, enthusiastically unbuckling her belt. If the surveillance camera had not captured it in a blind spot, she would have wanted to take out that thing to relieve the itch. But in this situation, it will take a while to get in. Ning 1111's mind went blank for a moment, and she screamed in retort, "This is not me, this is not me." While saying this, he snatched Tang Ning's phone and deleted the video without telling anyone. After deleting it, she breathed a sigh of relief. Tang Ning sneered, "This has been forwarded countless times and people all over the country have seen it. What's the point of deleting it?" Just as Ji Yuxi was about to ask what was going on, a man appeared at the door. He was wearing a dark grey high-end handmade suit. He was tall and straight, exuding nobility, but in his hand he was holding a package of snail noodles. His hair was slightly messy, but even so, he was still eye-catching. He didn't make people feel down and out, but instead made people envy which woman was so lucky to have such a noble man personally buy things for her. It was none other than Sai Chaos Hen. Before Ji Yuxi could say anything, she saw Ning 1111 running past her like a gust of wind. She covered her swollen face, looked at the man aggrievedly, pouted her lips, and tears fell from her eyes. "Second brother." When Sai Chaos Hen hurried over and saw Shu Hesi standing at the door of the room, he couldn't help but have a lot of chaotic thoughts in his mind. But now that he saw Tang Ning was there, he felt relieved. Regardless of whether this man is Ji Yuxi's husband or not, he will not allow them to have any intimate contact. Ji Yuxi is still his wife as stated in the marriage certificate, at least not during this period. It was not until this moment that he realized how petty he was regarding Ji Yuxi's matter. Seeing that Sai Chaos Hen ignored her, Ning 1111 called out again in a coquettish voice, "Second brother, look at how Ji Yuxi not only let her friends beat me up like this, but also spread rumors about me. It hurts so much." Ji Yuxi also looked at Sai Chaos Hen. She really wanted to know what decision he would make. Will you do the same as last time and ask her to apologize and blame her without any reason? Thinking of this, her heart beat faster and faster, and her palms broke out in sweat. She clenched her hands quietly and waited for his answer. Shu Hesi looked at Ji Yuxi's slightly trembling body and knew that she had only eaten 2 small cakes to fill her stomach that day, and had digested them long ago. What's more, she is pregnant now. If she doesn't replenish some sugar quickly, she will probably faint after a while. The most important thing is that her mood swings will be too big and it will be bad for the fetus. Especially since her physical condition is not good to begin with, if she is not careful, she may easily have a miscarriage. When they were chatting outside just now, he knew very well how much Ji Yuxi wanted a child. Even if they were not friends, even if he didn't like Ji Yuxi, but as an obstetrician and gynecologist, he would not allow a pregnant woman to have any mishaps in front of him. Shu Hesi took out a piece of chocolate from his pocket and handed it to Ji Yuxi. Ji Yuxi indeed felt very uncomfortable. As soon as she reached out to take it, someone clamped her arm tightly. Chapter 13, He is the dirtiest. I've already bought her favorite food, so you don't need to worry about it. Sai Chaos Hen spoke, with an inexplicable hostility in his voice. Even though Ning 1111's face was in so much pain that she couldn't concentrate, she could still tell that he cared about Ji Yuxi. In fact, this concern far exceeded her imagination. She hurriedly spoke up to make herself felt. "Second brother, you have to help her. What if my face is disfigured? She also used that video to slander my reputation. What should I do in the future?" Sai Chaos Hen glanced at her. The wound on her face was indeed serious, go back and take good care of yourself first, and tell me if you need anything. After suffering so much, you just tell her to go back and recuperate. Of course Ning 1111 didn't want to let it go so easily. Just as she was about to speak, a voice interrupted her, forget it. If you don't do those things, how would others know? If you really think I am slandering you, why not let your second brother help you? Tang Ning has played many cowardly female protagonists in dramas such as Chasing Wives in Crematoriums, so she can't stand Ning 1111's pretentious and artificial role as the white moonlight with a tea flavor. Especially this mistress was so shameless that she snatched the man in front of their husband. As expected, after she said that, Ning 1111 fell silent, and just covered her chest and cried in pain. Her body was shaky, as if she was about to die from crying. Second brother, I didn't do it. I really didn't do it. You have to believe me. Just when she was about to fall on Sai Chaos-hen, she heard a cry of surprise, Ji Yushi, what's wrong with you? At this moment, Ji Yushi closed his eyes and fell pale into Shu Hesi's arms. Shu Hesi checked her breath and found that she was still breathing. Then he breathed a sigh of relief and went to feel Ji Yushi's pulse. However, as soon as his finger touched it, it was pulled away by a hand. He looked up at the man in front of him, seeing the hostility in Sai Cheshen's eyes, and explained, I am a doctor. I told you, you don't have to worry about it. Sai Chaos-hen didn't even wait for Shu Hesi to react. He reached out and hugged Ji Yushi into his arms. After just a few days without any intimate contact, Ji Yushi has lost a lot of weight. His originally well-maintained figure has now returned to the skinny and fragile appearance he had before marriage. Sai Chaos-hen sat beside the bed, holding Ji Yushi's small hand and pressing it against his own brow, rubbing it gently. The doctor's advice from many years ago resurfaced, it's a miracle that the patient woke up. It's best not to let her get angry in the future, otherwise it will be difficult to save her if she faints again. He began to feel afraid. What if 1111 really can't wake up? What annoyed him the most was why he was so angry at Ji Yushi for having another man in her heart that he had to find Ning 1111 to make her angry. Outside the door, Shu Hesi looked at the two people sitting and lying inside from the window. He remembered what Ji Yushi said in his ear when he fainted. As he was hesitating, he saw his senior brother, who was holding Ji Yushi's physical examination report, rushing in through the door in a hurry. He hurriedly stopped her, brother, her previous illness hasn't recurred, right? No, she's just pregnant. Her body is weak to begin with and she hasn't taken good care of herself. How can she not get anxious and irritated with an empty stomach? It's no big deal. Just let her pay attention to nutrition and rest. The senior brother said breathlessly. Shu Hesi secretly breathed a sigh of relief, remembering what Ji Yushi had told him before she fainted. He hurriedly stopped his senior brother who was about to open the door. Well, senior brother, you've been working non-stop for several days. Let me go for you. It's a good opportunity for you to take a break. That's fine. You're an expert in obstetrics and gynecology. You're definitely better than me, a neurosurgeon. He would be more than happy to have someone to help him run errands. After the people left, Shu Hesi took out the page of the report that stated the patient was 6 weeks pregnant, folded it and put it in the pocket of his white coat, then turned the door and went in. Sai Chaos-hen heard the noise and looked up quickly. Doctor, how is she? He realized it was Shu Hesi halfway through his words, and his eyes couldn't help but become a little colder. My senior brother has a very sick patient to take care of, so he asked me to take him here. Shu Hesi handed him the medical report and said, Ji Yushi is fine, but you must not be angry anymore, otherwise. He deliberately stopped talking midway. Sai Chaos-hen was looking down at Ji Yushi's medical report carefully. When he heard him say this, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He looked up at him with red eyes, otherwise what? He couldn't bear to hear any bad news about Ji Yushi. Shu Hesi put his hands in his white coat, holding Ji Yushi's pregnancy test sheet, and lied, otherwise she will never be able to get pregnant in the future. Although he had only spent a short time with Ji Yushi, he could tell from her words and small gestures how much she was looking forward to the birth of this child. It would be fine if they were just a young couple who loved each other in an ordinary and happy life, but now they are in the process of getting a divorce. If Sai Chaos-hen knew about this child, she would probably abort it. If she was luckier, she might be allowed to give birth to the child, leaving the mother behind and giving the child to be raised by the Sai family. After all, a big family like the Sai family would never allow their own bloodline to be lost outside. It would be best to do as Ji Yushi instructed. Sai Kaya-sen was stunned for a moment, and then Ji Yushi slowly opened her eyes. She felt someone grabbing her hand. She looked in the direction and found that it was Sai Kaya-sen, so she pulled her hand back. He also withdrew his gaze and said in a weak voice, "Senior, I want to drink some water." Shuhesi sighed and found a disposable cup to pour her a cup of warm water. Although she had received some glucose, he still put some brown sugar in the water. Ji Yushi reached out to take it, but Sai Kaya-sen took it away and threw it away first. "It's dirty, I won't drink his." Sai Kaya-sen poured another cup and put one hand through the back of Ji Yushi's neck to gently lift her up, hoping that she would feel more comfortable drinking the water. Ji Yushi suddenly resisted. "Don't touch me." From last night till now, she had been going to bars and parties, and had hardly eaten anything, so she fainted. And now she just wanted to drink a glass of water poured by the senior, and he said it was dirty. Seeing him like that yesterday, I thought he and Ning 1111 had no relationship. It wasn't until today that I saw the video in which he and Ning 1111 were hugging each other tightly, and the scene of them almost intercourse was captured. Now you say she is dirty. What are his qualifications? He is the dirtiest person here. But she was like a fool, enduring the sleepiness and pain and using her hands to accompany him the whole night. Ji Yushi looked at her right hand, as if she smelled the man's scent again. Her stomach churned and she vomited with a vomiting sound. Sai Kaya-sen looked at what she vomited and was immediately surprised. Chapter 14, You Are My Wife. All Ji Yushi spat out was a pool of yellow water, with a faint trace of blood sticking to the corners of his mouth. 1111, what's wrong with you? Sai Kaya-sen hurriedly reached out to wipe it. But Ji Yushi avoided his touch. She looked up. Looking at the handsome and noble man in front of her, his eyes were full of worry for her. If this had happened in the past, she would have happily snuggled in his arms and acted coquettishly. But now, she felt very disgusted. Shuhesi also realized that the current situation was not suitable to stay, so he told Ji Yushi to take care of himself and left. The ward suddenly became quiet. While Ji Yushi was sitting there quietly, Sai Kaya-sen raised his hand again, wanting to wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. But Ji Yushi turned his head away and avoided him from touching. Sai Cheshin's face changed instantly. Ever since Ji Yushi woke up from the car accident, it has been a long time since she resisted his touch again and again like today. He knew that all this was because of the appearance of Shuhesi. Instantly, veins bulged on his forehead, but his eyes fell on her pale little face, and he suppressed his anger and said softly, "Being hungry for so long is not good for your health. If you want to eat something, I'll go buy it. I just woke up and vomited blood. I definitely can't eat snail noodles anymore. Sai Kaya-sen, let's get divorced." Ji Yushi interrupted him calmly. She had been giving him opportunities to explain what happened last night, and she had even thought of excuses for him, but he avoided the question and used what she wanted to eat as an excuse to cover it up. He didn't mention anything about what he and Ning 1111 did last night. She loves him, but no matter how much she loves him, how reluctant she is, or how painful it is, she still has the minimum moral bottom line. She will never share a man with another woman. What did you say? Sai Kaya-sen seemed to have never expected that she would actually file for divorce. Ji Yushi raised her little face and repeated calmly, "I say, let's get a divorce." Her voice was not loud, but every word she said hit Sai Cheshin's eardrum. His whole body was filled with coldness and he stared at Ji Yushi with grim eyes. Sudden. Sai Kaya-sen suddenly leaned over, and his entire body covered Ji Yushi like an iron net, putting her under his shadow, giving people an extremely strong feeling of oppression. His eyes turned red and he roared like a wild beast, "Ji Yushi, say it again. We're away from." Oh. Before Ji Yushi could finish her words, she was blocked by a pair of cold lips. His kiss couldn't be considered a kiss at all. It was more like biting her to vent some emotion, and he even tried to leave a mark of his scent on her body. Natural tears welled up in the corners of Ji Yushi's eyes, but in an instant, they were swept away by the man's big tongue. He lifted her up with his long, strong arms and placed her on his sturdy legs. This posture undoubtedly made the two of them closer. After a while, Sai Kaya-sen let her go, but his eyes were still staring at her like a beast staring at its prey. He panted, "Ji Yushi, I'll give you another chance. Do you still want a divorce?" "I want to leave." Caught off guard, her lips were blocked again. It seemed that he would never let her go as long as what she said was not to his liking. All the air in Ji Yushi's mouth was taken away. In an instant, the ward filled with disinfectant was filled with the sizzling sound of ambiguous kisses. If someone passed by here, they would blush and shyly slip away. Ji Yushi wanted to push him away, but how could she push a grown man with her own strength, especially since she was still very weak? Perhaps Sai Kaosen sensed her resistance, so he slowed down his strength and instead sucked deeper and deeper. This kind of kiss was gentle, soft, delicate, and dense. The tip of the tongue felt like an electric shock, spreading all over the body. Ji Yushi was kissed so soft that she couldn't help but immerse herself in it. They always fit perfectly in bed. Especially since Sai Kaosen had been single for more than 30 years, he had never experienced this before. It was not until he met Ji Yushi and fell in love for the first time that he really understood what his brothers meant by the spiritual connection and fusion of water with the one they loved. While Ji Yushi was being kissed by him and feeling confused, he wrapped her slender legs around his thin waist and suddenly pressed her under him. He peeled off the buttons one by one, and when the fair skin came into contact with the air, Ji Yushi shivered from the cold. Only then did he come to his senses and realize what he almost did. She hurriedly reached out to push him away, but Sai Kaosen grabbed him with one hand and twisted it behind her head. He continued to unbutton her clothes with his other hand. Ji Yushi struggled. He clearly didn't love her and clearly had his own Bai Yueguang in his heart, but now he was pressing her down and undressing her. What is this? At this moment, she felt extremely humiliated. Thinking that he and Ning 1111 were in the same position last night, she didn't know where she got the strength to push him away. Sai Kaosen was not paying attention for a moment and was pushed back a few steps. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth after he stood still. Do you like him so much that you are willing to divorce me at all costs? Ji Yushi was confused by his words. She just felt that he really loved Ning 1111. For her reputation, he was willing to frame her with a false charge. Fortunately, she was used to it and didn't bother to argue with him. You were the one who proposed the divorce first, and I just agree now. Little did he know that this kind of Ji Yushi made Sai Kaosen feel very abnormal, which made him think that the person she had been dreaming about every day for the past 6 months might be Queen Shu Hesi. Sai Chashin's mouth curled up in mockery. He walked towards her step by step with his long legs, raised Ji Yushi's chin condescendingly, and forced her to look at him. I agree to the divorce you mentioned. Ji Yushi was stunned. She totally couldn't understand Sai Chashin's fickleness. But, it's good to agree. But you have to serve me well. Sai Kaosen looked at his masterpiece. Ji Yushi then remembered something and hurriedly pulled her clothes together, but even so, a lot of her underwear was exposed. She was so embarrassed that her body trembled slightly, her chest rose and fell, and she stared at him with tears in her eyes. Sai Kaosen, you bastard. Although she looked angry, her eyes were full of lust, which gave people an infinite temptation. Sai Kaosen laughed in anger, I'm a bastard. Ji Yushi, who had devoted her whole heart to him at the beginning, became so cold and indifferent to Shu Hesi just because they had been together for a few days. It seemed that she never let him go back then. Ji Yushi, don't forget that you are still my wife. I have the right to demand the use of marital rights. Sai Kaosen pulled with both hands. With a crackling sound. It was the sound of cloth being torn. He pulled out his belt, threw it on the bed, and pushed Ji Yushi into a corner, with no way to retreat. Ji Yushi, do you think Shu Hesi will not despise you and want you after I have used you for so many years? Chapter 15, On the eve of divorce, I learned that she was pregnant. No. Why drag irrelevant people into this? Their divorce has nothing to do with the senior. Tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. In Sai Chashin's opinion, Ji Yushi's look just meant that she didn't want to hear Shu Hesi's words that he didn't want her. When he thought of this, Sai Kaosen felt bitter and annoyed. He ignored her struggles and slaps and fiercely blocked her lips. At the same time, the pinhole camera facing the bed recorded everything. Ning 1111 had a swollen pig-like face and was wearing satin pajamas, lying crookedly on the bed. Sai Kaosen, who was angry, hugged the bitch Ji Yushi and left without caring about her life or death. Just looking at the person who was pestering her on the phone, even though there were few indescribable things she could see, she felt something instantly. From childhood to adulthood, Sai Kaosen always looked cold to everyone, and this was the first time she saw him getting carried away by lust. She couldn't help but mutter a few words. If you had half this reaction when I seduced you, I wouldn't have despised you for being dull and uninteresting and run away to find a man abroad. In the video, the man's dry and broad hands were pinching hard. Ning 1111 was so jealous that her eyes turned red. She pretends to be serious on the surface, but she's even more slutty than me behind the scenes. Second brother has only done a few things and she's already so slutty. Trash. Slutty. A female prostitute or a female mistress who is specifically for men's entertainment. Ning 1111 said this while looking at Sai Cheshin's handsome face full of lust and love and imagining the bitch under him as herself. After a moment, a white light flashed before her eyes. You are so sexy. You can feel it even in this way. After Ning 1111 heard the male voice, she realized belatedly that she was still on video. I reluctantly turned off the surveillance camera and switched to WeChat. She looked at the man in the video and curled her lips. Who are you? Last night she tried to drug Sai Chaosen in the bar, but failed. Instead, it was this man who seduced her into bed. She was so greedy for the man at that time that she didn't care about anything else. Nothing happened to the other person that night, but she was admitted to the hospital. She was in pain even when she went to the party today. However, these are not the point. The important thing is, after this man knew that the people she wanted to break up were Ji Yushi and Sai Chaosen, he volunteered to hack into the hospital's surveillance. Only then could she see what had just happened. What is your purpose in helping me like this? Ning 1111 never believed that he fell in love with her just by having sex with her once. The man took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. Then his eyes slowly moved downwards, stopping at the bulge below her collarbone. He licked his lips obscenely and said, "We have been honest with each other, so you don't have to be so defensive towards me. Your target is Sai Chaosen, and my target is Ji Yushi." Ning 1111 looked at the man for a while, as if to verify his authenticity. Then, she smiled, opened her clothes, and said, "Okay, let me see your skills first." Bitch. Ever since the unpleasant incident that happened with Sai Chaosen in the hospital, Ji Yushi has not seen or contacted him again. Today, after participating in a dating variety show, she took a taxi to the hospital for a prenatal checkup. Ji Yushi took a number and lay on the examination table waiting for the doctor to come. But as I waited, I fell asleep without realizing it. When I woke up again, I found a man next to me. This man was none other than Sai Chaosen. At this moment, he stared at the display screen of the B ultrasound machine, his face gloomy enough to drip water, and asked sideways, "Whose child are you pregnant with?" Before Ji Yushi could answer, he said, "Kill this bastard for me." "Don't want." Ji Yushi screamed in fear and opened his eyes suddenly, only to find that he was dreaming. She raised her hand and was about to wipe away the cold sweat, but someone had already wiped the sweat off her face. Ji Yushi slowly turned his head, thinking it was a gentle nurse, but it was Shuhesi he saw. She never expected that it would be him who would give her a prenatal checkup today. Obviously, she had finished recording the show and left quietly while the director was discussing the script with him, but how could? Shuhesi ignored her alienation from him and said gently, "Ji Yushi, the first 3 months of pregnancy is a dangerous time, you should not avoid medical treatment." Her sudden fainting that day could not be erased from his mind. He has been worried about her these past few days. He wanted to ask her when they were recording the show, but she was avoiding him. "Ji Yushi, although I don't know why Mr. Sai is so hostile to me, what I want to say is that my concern for you is just that of a doctor to a patient. If you really feel troubled, I can also recommend you another reliable doctor." When Ji Yushi heard his words, her cheeks turned red with shame. Indeed. There is nothing going on between them, and Sai Cheshin's suspicion should not affect their normal relationship. The senior was only being polite and concerned about her because they were from the same school, and she really shouldn't have avoided him like this. After all, no pregnant woman would refuse to be taken care of by Shuhesi, a famous obstetrician and gynecologist both at home and abroad. What's more, her health was indeed poor. If she didn't have a good obstetrician who could keep the secret to help her, she might not be able to keep the child. Ji Yushi stroked her belly. "Senior, I'm sorry." Shuhesi shook his head, indicating that everything was fine, and handed her the ultrasound report he had just completed. It was clearly just a blurry dot on the paper, but she could feel a small life. It was her child. "I couldn't help but cry for joy. You should be more careful next time and not do strenuous exercise anymore." Shuhesi's words were vague, but Ji Yushi understood what he meant. She blushed and nodded. The woman in front of him was thin but dazzling, especially her clear eyes reflecting his figure, which made Shuhesi couldn't help but raise his hand and rub the top of her head. Actually, I'm not sick. Sister Ji Yushi, why are you here? Ning 1111 and Sai Chaos-en were chatting and laughing when they opened the door, but unexpectedly saw Ji Yushi. Of course, Sai Chaos-en did not miss Yu Hes's intimate actions towards Ji Yushi. Their eyes met, and sparks exploded in the air. Time passed by little, and it was Ning 1111's cry that caught everyone's attention. My menstruation has not come for a long time, and my stomach is very uncomfortable. Can you please check it for me, Dr. Shu? Shu Hesi was worried that Ji Yushi would be punished by Sai Chaos-en again like last time, and was trying to find an excuse to help Ji Yushi. He never expected that Sai Chaos-en was faster than him. He raised his long legs, walked a few steps to Ji Yushi, grabbed her arm, and left. Sai Chaos-en didn't let her go until they were alone. He stared at her without blinking. You're pregnant. Chapter 16, Going for a Divorce. Ji Yushi clenched the ultrasound report in his hand, his heart beating like thunder. Looking at the man in front of me with a smile on his face, what came to my mind was the dream I had at that time. In the dream, Sai Chaos-en had a gloomy face and did not give her any chance to refute. He bluntly said that the baby in her belly was a bastard and asked her to abort it. In fact, even if she hadn't had such a dream, she wouldn't have told him about what had happened in the past few days. I just feel sick to my stomach, so I came to check it out. Sai Chaos-en narrowed his eyes slightly, obviously not believing it. Ji Yushi ignored it and changed the subject. We should have time to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau today, right? He said at the time that he would agree to a divorce as long as she served him well. But more than half a month passed, and when she finally got herself together and contacted him to get a divorce, he had either turned off his phone or was so busy that he had already gone abroad. Later I heard from his secretary that Mr. Sai has been working non-stop recently and has no time to rest. She thought that as long as Sai Chaos-en agreed to divorce, she could wait. But unexpectedly, he was free today and accompanied Ning 1111 to see the doctor. Regardless of Sai Chashen's reaction, Ji Yushi took the opportunity to secretly put the ultrasound report in her bag while turning around. After taking a few steps, she turned back and said, "Let's go. If we're any later, the Civil Affairs Bureau will be closed." Sai Chaos-en frowned. Ji Yushi, do you really have to get mad at me? Oh. Having a bad temper. It has come to this point, but he thinks he is just throwing a tantrum. Ever since she became pregnant, there was not a moment that she didn't want to tell him. But what did she get in return? It was he who wanted to divorce herself and marry his white moonlight Ning 1111. His consideration, companionship, and love for me over the past 3 years were all just for a substitute. He even had sex with Ning 1111 while their marriage was still going on. How is this different from cheating? Since they can't wait, she will help them. Ji Yushi walked back a few steps, suppressed his nausea, took Sai Chashen's hand and walked out. At this time, Ning 1111 had just finished an ultrasound and happened to see this scene. She thought Sai Chaos-en was going to be intimate with Ji Yushi again. He hurried over and said, "Sister Ji Yushi, where are you taking my second brother? Your best friend beat me up pretty badly last time, and my second brother is taking me to see a doctor this time. Are you going to abandon me? People come and go in the hospital corridor." Ning 1111's voice was not small, loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. I saw those people whispering, looking at the unhealed wound on Ning 1111's face, and then looking at Ji Yushi's indifferent expression. The conclusion was made in an instant, and Ning 1111 was regarded as the victim. Pointing fingers at Ji Yushi and calling her a worthless person. Seeing that she had achieved the effect she wanted, Ning 1111 let her tears stay in her eyes, refusing to fall. She gently grasped Sai Chashen's sleeve and shook him. "Second brother, where are you going with Sister Ji Yushi? Can't you wait until my ultrasound report comes out first? I feel really bad right now. We are going to get a divorce." Ji Yushi had seen enough of her pretense. She let go of Sai Chashen's hand. "Don't you want me to get a divorce and be with my husband the most, Miss Ning?" Ning 1111 never expected that Ji Yushi would agree to divorce so easily, and she was very happy. When she turned to look at Sai Chaos-en, she saw that when Sai Chaos-en heard Ji Yushi calling him husband, his face was filled with joy. Her heart skipped a beat. What was going on? Could it be that this bitch has really taken root in Sai Chashen's heart? No, you can't. Her man must not have other women in his heart. Sai Chaos-en was not happy for long before he heard Ji Yushi's words. "After the divorce, you don't have to be sneaky behind my back anymore. Ji Yushi. Sai Cheshin's loud scolding only made Ji Yuxi feel that she had lost his face in front of so many people and hurt his white moonlight. What's wrong? Was I wrong? Ji Yuxi met his gaze without fear. Sai Kaisen frowned at her, not understanding why she could have misunderstood him so deeply. He admitted that he wanted to make Ji Yuxi jealous on purpose, but at the moment, she didn't look jealous from the serious look on her face. Ji Yuxi looked at him pretending to be ignorant, so she simply confessed, since you couldn't help but have sex with Ning 1111 in the bar that night, you might as well get a divorce sooner. She thought she had already let it go. But when the past is brought up again, I still feel so heartbroken that I can't breathe. The man in front of her was the one who lent a helping hand to her when the Jiu family went bankrupt and was isolated and helpless, the one who took care of her for several years after her car accident, and the man she had loved for so many years. Unfortunately, these are all fake. Had a relationship with Ning 1111. Sai Kaisen learned that Ji Yuxi wanted a divorce only because she misunderstood him, not because of Shu Hesi. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Second brother, don't be angry with sister Ji Yuxi. It was my fault in the first place. I shouldn't have taken advantage of our childhood engagement to get close to you despite the fact that you were already married. Sai Kaisen was about to explain when Ning 1111 interrupted him. She spoke every word sincerely, tears streaming down her face, and she was sobbing and gasping for breath, but I was afraid of my illness and that I would delay your care, so I had to leave. I'm sorry. Seeing that she was about to faint, Sai Kaisen remembered that Ning 1111 was seriously ill, so he didn't bother to explain to Ji Yuxi, but picked her up and called for a doctor. But at this moment, Ji Yuxi stubbornly grabbed Sai Cheshin's clothes and said, "Go get a divorce first." Sai Kaisen turned around and looked at her. Her illness will endanger her life if it attacks. Ji Yuxi, human life is at stake now, so let's wait for the divorce. After 3 years of being together, he also knew that she was a gentle person. If she didn't really care, she would never say such embarrassing things in public. It can be seen that she still has him in her heart. In this case, there is no point in getting a divorce. Ji Yuxi glanced at Ning 1111 who was limp in his arms, and said calmly, "Do you believe that if you divorce me now, she will get better immediately? This is a hospital, with so many doctors, don't they know how to save Ning 1111? It just takes a while, is he so reluctant to do so?" At this moment, Ning 1111 was afraid that the two would not be able to divorce, so she said weakly, "Second brother, you should listen to sister Ji Yuxi and go with her. I'm fine. You can't ignore your body like this. You can get a divorce whenever you want, but your body can't wait forever." When Sai Kaisen said this, Ning 1111 felt a little sweet and lay peacefully in his arms. If you can't leave today, then you can't leave. Anyway, Ji Yuxi has already misunderstood that she and Sai Kaisen have slept together, and it seems that she can't accept it at all. As long as she continues to deepen this misunderstanding, divorce is only a matter of time, isn't it? Chapter 17, A Pile of Waste Paper. Ji Yuxi was very persistent and blocked their way, "Go get a divorce. It would be better to cut the Gordian knot quickly than to be like this, with a blunt knife cutting her flesh, causing a ripping pain that made her breathless." "Ji Yuxi, when did you become so ignorant?" Sai Kaisen looked at her with such cold eyes that it was as if he was meeting her for the first time. "You really disappoint me." Hearing this, Ji Yuxi was stunned at first, as if he had never expected him to say such a thing. "I've been married to him for 3 years. Even though he doesn't love me, he should at least know what kind of person I am." But she didn't expect that he would think of her like this. Sure enough, the white moonlight is the white moonlight. As long as she appears, the existence of others seems insignificant. Even though Ning 1111 used such poor acting skills, he could still indulge her unconditionally and even unreasonably meet all her demands. As long as she is happy. At this moment, Ji Yuxi finally understood. All along, there has never been a place for anyone else in Sai Cheshin's heart except Ning 1111. Thinking of this, Ji Yuxi was so sad that she almost couldn't stand. She smiled forlornly, made way, and stepped aside. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have been so willful. You should not have any illusions. I fantasized that even if I was a substitute, I was once loved by him." Reality gave her a hard slap in the face, waking her up completely. After all, Sai Kaisen had lived with Ji Yuxi for 3 years. Looking at Ji Yuxi at this moment, he felt a sudden pain in his heart. 1111, I was wrong. Ning 1111 suddenly said, "Second brother, I know you said that about Sister Ji Yushi for my own good. She turned to Ji Yushi and said, Sister Ji Yushi, don't be sad. Second brother is just too worried about me. As she spoke, she suddenly moved, and without Sai-Chashin's in sight, she said silently, Ji Yushi, you have seen how much Sai-Chaos-en cares about me. Ji Yushi felt extremely distressed, but he walked towards her calmly. You'd better beg him to love you forever, otherwise, your tomorrow will be my today. Ning 1111 gnashed her teeth in hatred. If Sai-Chaos-en hadn't been here, she would have stood up and slapped Ji Yushi. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye she caught a glimpse of a crumpled piece of paper sticking out of her bag. She frowned slightly, as if she remembered something, and took the paper away quietly while Ji Yushi stood up. After saying this, Ji Yushi turned around and left without caring about Sai-Chashin's reaction. Ning 1111 instantly felt that the man's heart beside her had also followed Ji Yushi. In his heart, he cursed Ji Yushi to death, but he spoke weakly to try to get Sai-Chashin's attention. Second brother, please go with me to the checkup. I'm too scared to be alone. She reached out to touch Sai-Chashin's fingertips. But unexpectedly, Sai-Chaos-en avoided him directly with disgust. He couldn't understand why he was so cold all of a sudden. Second brother, did 1111 do something wrong? Sai-Chaos-en looked at her coldly. 1111, why did you misunderstand that we had sex last night? Ning 1111's heart skipped a beat and she subconsciously clenched the piece of paper tightly. Yesterday, Tang Ning showed the video to Sister Ji Yushi. I explained that it wasn't us at all. Maybe Sister Ji Yushi misunderstood. Sai-Chaos-en looked at her for a while. Ning 1111, I did say I would marry you, but that is only on the premise that you can't hurt 1111. Second brother, if you keep dragging your feet on getting a divorce, you're hurting both me and Ji Yushi at the same time. Ning 1111 continued to mutter in a low voice, Grandpa Sai will also be unhappy. Sai-Chaos-en reminded her, Ning 1111, don't forget that although you and I were engaged as children, that was 3 years later. During this period, if you dare to interfere in the relationship between me and Ji Yushi, I will cancel this marriage regardless of whether it was arranged by Grandpa or not. These words struck Ning 1111's heart like cold iron. Sai-Chaos-en is now the one in charge of the Sai family, so naturally he has the final say on whether something is feasible or not. The reason why he did not deny Ning 1111's childhood marriage was, on the one hand, to respect the face of the elders, and on the other hand, he wanted to see if Ji Yushi would be jealous of him. Now that the goal has been achieved, there is no need to have anything to do with Ning 1111. Ning 1111 had never seen Sai-Chaos-en lose his temper with her since she was a child. She shuddered and nodded gently, I understand. At this moment, Sai-Chashin's cell phone suddenly rang. It was a call from his assistant, so he walked aside to answer it. The doctor dared to come and treat Ning 1111 at this time. Sai-Chaos-en. But the next second, I only felt a resistance. Sai-Chaos-en turned around and saw Ning 1111 pulling at her clothes. Second brother, the treatment equipment is very cold. I'm scared to be alone. Boom. There was a loud thunder, as if it was brushing past someone's ear. Under the huge thunder, Ning 1111 looked particularly pitiful. Sai-Chaos-en looked at Ning 1111's pitiful eyes, as if he remembered something, and said slowly, if you are afraid, I. Snap. Thunder roared past his ears again, drowning out the second half of Sai-Chashin's words. Ning 1111 didn't hear it and thought he was going to stay with her. She was visibly happy, but then she heard him say, I'll let my aunt come to accompany you. As he said this, he called Ning's mother and brushed away Ning 1111's hand. Ning 1111's face fell instantly and she felt very sad. It was obvious that Sai-Chaos-en doted on her the most when they were little. It's only been 3 years, how come she has changed so much? She lowered her head and spread out the piece of paper in her palm. After smoothing it down, I realized it was an ultrasound report. It says that Ji Yushi is 8 weeks pregnant. Ning 1111's face changed drastically in an instant. How could it be possible that that bitch was pregnant? What are you holding? When Ning 1111 froze, Sai-Chaos-en had finished his phone call and walked over. He saw the crumpled piece of paper in her hand and asked. Ning 1111 hurriedly stuffed the paper into her clothes and pursed her lips. It's nothing, just a piece of waste paper. Seeing that Ning 1111 didn't want to talk much, Sai-Chaos-en didn't ask any further questions. He didn't have that much time to listen to her. Not interested either. When he thought of the little guy at home who was afraid of thunder, he was eager to go home. I've already spoken to my aunt, she will be here soon, you should get treatment, I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. He ignored Ning 1111's pleas and left her to the attending doctor for care before leaving without looking back. Yes, yes, yes. The doctor followed behind Sai Chaos Hen, nodding and bowing. Ning 1111 watched Sai Chashen's back gradually disappearing away, and her hand holding the ultrasound report tightened. She wiped the tears from her cheeks, took out her cell phone and made a call. Ji she is pregnant now, which is just what you want. Make her have an abortion. Chapter 18, A Critical Moment. Ji she didn't know how he got out of the hospital and walked halfway there in a daze. There was a loud thunder in the sky, which made her scalp numb instantly. Her legs felt like they were filled with lead and she couldn't move at all. Suddenly, those memories came flooding back like the sea. 3 years ago, when the Jiu family was about to go bankrupt and debt collectors came to her house, all her memories of being accused, abused and trampled upon by countless people came flooding back. At that time, she was isolated and helpless, and she wanted to contact her fiancé, the only person who might help her, but she could not get through. The days are like hell, repeating day after day. Until one day, when she was in a miserable state, Sai Chaos Hen appeared in front of her. He was dressed in a black and grey suit, his face was dignified and handsome, and he exuded an unattainable aura and elegance. Holding an umbrella over her head, he gently helped herself up, and regardless of the mud on her body, he wiped the dirt off her face with his dry, clean and warm fingers. To this day, she still remembers him saying, "I can help Goose." That sound was like the sound of nature to her. However, she quickly remembered that she was still pregnant and couldn't get caught in the rain and affect the baby, so she instantly pulled herself out of her memories. He walked slowly towards the coffee shop in front of the hospital. It's raining heavily. Even though she walked very hard, he still got wet. 1111, are you okay? As the words fell, an umbrella appeared above his head. Smelling the cool and familiar breath, at this moment, she was suddenly stunned. Thinking back to a rainy night like this 3 years ago, he had saved me like a god, and since then, I have been free from suffering and have only safety by his side. My eyes suddenly felt sore and my heart felt sore, numb and swollen. I have clearly decided to divorce and no longer love or depend on him, but I just can't stop lingering on the warmth I once had. She couldn't bear it any longer, turned around and hugged him, her voice choked with sobs, Shin. The man being hugged stiffened for a moment, and then some part of his body slowly reacted. While she was still not noticing, he slowly changed his posture and raised his hand to push up his glasses. 1111, are you okay? She opened his eyes quickly and quickly let go of his arms. Look up. The man in front of me is not Sai Chaos Hen. But, Gu's company is facing bankruptcy, and the fiancé who can't be contacted is Chihar. She stepped back repeatedly, her palms subconsciously protecting her lower abdomen. Why are you here? He looked at she's tone full of alienation and vigilance, suppressed the lust under his glasses, and put on a sincere smile. 1111, I'm sorry for leaving you for so many years. Now that I'm back, give me a chance to take care of you again, okay? When I was monitoring she before, I felt that she was very attractive. I didn't expect that when we were face to face and so close to each other, especially after the hug, I realized that she had already been developed to perfection. If you eat it now, it's just the right taste. He took another step forward, with a gentle smile on his delicate face. An uninformed passerby looking at this scene would think that a long-distance couple finally met each other. The boy opened his arms gently, waiting for the girl to hug him back. Some passers-by even took out their mobile phones to take pictures and upload them to the internet. For this reason, they all started to make a fuss. She shook her head, I'm already married. But her voice was so weak that it was drowned out by the crowd. He was stunned for a moment, but quickly smiled again. The nurse pretended not to have heard her and walked over to her and hugged her tightly in her arms. He looked happy as if he had recovered something he had lost. She has an ethereal look to begin with, and although he is not as handsome as Sai Chaos Hen, he is also good-looking. This good-looking couple greatly satisfies passers-by's yearning for love. They took videos and posted them online, editing them with labels like reunion after a long separation and true love. In an instant, it was forwarded tens of thousands of times. It quickly became one of the top 3 hot topics on Weibo. When assistant Sai Chaos Hen saw the girl and boy in the video, he thought that the president and his wife had resolved their misunderstanding and reconciled. I planned to taste it again, but I didn't expect to take a closer look. It is true that the girl in the video is his wife, but the man is not the president at all except for his clothes and figure that is similar to the president. Especially that face, it was plain except for being a little bit handsome, how could it compare to their CEO? However, now is not the time to think about this. Instead, we need to first confirm whether the president has seen this video. The assistant hurriedly called but found that the call could not be connected no matter how he tried. He had to ask the public relations department to delete the video. Others may not understand the president, but he knows it very well. After his wife had a car accident, the president's hair turned white overnight. He had no time to manage such a large company and could only focus on taking care of his wife who might become a vegetable and never wake up. After taking care of her for more than half a year, I finally saw that my wife was in better shape, so I started to focus on both work and taking care of her. Those 3 years were simply a nightmare for the assistant, and it was also the thing he admired most about the president. It was from there that he began to understand that his wife was far more important than anything else in the president's heart. Men don't want other men to have anything to do with their women, especially a very paranoid man like the president. The assistant could probably imagine Sai Chaos-en going crazy after seeing this video, so he deleted the video immediately. On site, Ji Yushi had no idea of Chi He's intentions. She struggled desperately, but was easily resolved by Chi He. He whispered, 1111, so many people are watching us, please give me some face. Look, they all think we're a couple. If you turn hostile at this moment, do you think you'll be labeled a scumbag, have a bad temper, or be shameless and be cyberbullied? Ji Yushi was so angry that she was shaking. Chi He, you were my fiancé, but you abandoned me when I was in the most difficult time. Do you think I can forgive you? I warn you to let go quickly, or my husband will not let you have a good time. Chi He chuckled, Ji Yushi, aren't you going to get a divorce? Are you sure Sai Chaos-en will help you? Or, do you think he will believe what you say now? He squinted his eyes and looked at the handsome man in the crowd who was emitting cold air, staring at them with a gloomy face, and his noble temperament was particularly outstanding. Ji Yushi frowned slightly, what did you say? She was face to face with Chi He and could not see Chi He's sight at all. I said, your husband, no, your ex-husband is watching us being so loving, but he doesn't seem happy. Ji Yushi froze. She never expected Sai Chaos-en to see it, let alone expect him to come. Chi He seized the opportunity, leaned forward slightly, and kissed Ji Yushi's cheek. Bang bang bang. Chapter 19, Hurrah. Ji Yushi didn't have time to dodge. Moment. The fierce palm wind brushed past her face. Bang. Fist. It hit Chi He's brow hard, and even his glasses were smashed into pieces. But this is far from enough. Sai Chaos-en frowned and threw another punch. Chi Heban is just a weakling, no way he can compare to someone like Sai Chaos-en who has received professional training. He had no time to react and was hit several more times. In the end, he was kicked to the ground by Sai Chaos-en. Chi He no longer looked as clean and handsome as he had just now. Instead, he was lying on the ground like a dead dog, gasping for breath. He opened his mouth and let out a wow. There were a few teeth wrapped in the blood that was spat out. No one thought that the sweet scene would turn into a fighting scene, the change was too fast. In an instant, some people ran away, some people called the police, and all the people who were surrounding here disappeared. All that was left was a mess and blood. Ji Yushi had never seen such a scene before. Suddenly, his face turned pale. She stared at Chi He lying in a pool of blood, and was stunned for a moment. Do you feel so sorry for him? Originally, through investigation, it was learned that Shuhesi and Ji Yushi had never had any intimate contact and it was just a misunderstanding. Sai Chaos-en didn't know how happy he was. At the same time, she felt very regretful for letting her go back alone in the weather that she feared the most. But when he hurriedly chased after it, what he saw was she was having a tryst with her ex-fiancé behind his back. Until now, she still dared to look at him with that distressed and helpless expression. What do you take him for? Air? Before Ji Yushi could refute, his wrist was suddenly clamped. The force was so rough that it seemed as if it could break her. Sai Chaos-en, I didn't. Let me go, it hurts, you hurt me. Ji Yushi wanted to shake him off. Sai Chaos-en didn't hear her explanation at all, he just felt that she was trying to escape from him. My heart was instantly stabbed with pain. He just grabbed her, but she reacted so strongly. But just now, he saw it clearly. Not only did she take the initiative to hug Chi-hee, but her face was also filled with surprise, excitement, and love. The are that I couldn't help shouting in my dream. The doctor said that she has someone she loves deeply and can't let go. Combining all these signs, who else could it be if not Chi-hee? She had no idea what Sae-Chaos-hen was thinking. She only knew that it was too painful. Sae-Chaos-hen, please, let me go, okay? This. When Sae-Chaos-hen heard this, it was equivalent to confirming his thoughts. She begged him to let her go in order to be with Chi-hee. Sae-Chaos-hen was furious and squeezed out 3 words from between his teeth, don't even think about it. Suddenly, he reached out and pulled off Ji-Yuxi's knitted jacket. With a crackling sound, the clothes were torn to shreds and thrown on the ground. In order to facilitate the pregnancy checkup today, Ji-Yuxi only wore a thin suspender. She had always felt insecure, so she put on a knitted jacket to cover herself up and felt much better. At this moment, on the busy street, Sae-Chaos-hen just tore her clothes and threw them away. What's the difference between this and stripping her naked and throwing her on the street? She just felt that she had no power to fight back. No matter how she explained, he would not listen, and her dignity was rubbed to the ground. Tears, click. I fell down unconsciously. How could you treat her like this? Why are you crying? Sae-Chaoshen's heart softened, and the force he used to wipe her tears became much gentler. But her mouth was still hard. You went out for a tryst with a wild man, and I said a few words to you and you were wronged. She stopped. The tears were also gathered in the eye sockets and no longer fell down. It turns out that he really didn't understand himself at all from the beginning to the end. In an instant, she understood everything. As if to verify, I asked him, what kind of person am I in your eyes? What kind of person are you? You were flirting with Shu Hesi yesterday, and today you're having a tryst with your ex-fiancée. Sae-Chaos-hen has been working day and night wherever he goes since he was a child. It is impossible for him to say that he doesn't have the temper of a rich young master. Especially. It seems like she has made a mistake now and not only wants to blame it on him. He questioned him with confidence. When I got excited, I didn't control my words and blurted out everything. Sae-Chaos-hen hurriedly tried to make amends. Sae-Chaos-hen, really, let's get a divorce. She endured the pain. If you hadn't refused to divorce me, I wouldn't have been so anxious to have a tryst with Chi-hee behind your back. No matter how she tried to avoid suspicion with Shu Hesi, he would always believe that there was something unclear between him and Shu Hesi. It's no surprise that people think she and Chi-hee are having an affair. Since this was always the image of her in his mind, she had nothing to explain. Instead of torturing each other, it is better to let go, which is better than being tormented and hurt like this every day. 11:11, let's go. Chi-hee didn't know when he caught his breath, and he struggled to walk to Ji-Yuxi's side. His hand even rested on her fair shoulders. Don't touch her. Sae-Chaos-hen suddenly reached out, took Chi-hee's hand away, and quickly took out a wet tissue to wipe Ji-Yuxi's shoulders. While wiping, he said, dirty. Chi-hee's hand was clearly caught by Sae-Chaos-hen while it was still in the air, but even so, he still felt that he was dirty. Oh. Close your eyes, then open them again. Ji-Yuxi's eyes were already indifferent. She took off the jade bracelet on her hand and stuffed it into his hand. Mr. Sai, I'll be waiting for you at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you there. Turn around. Before I took 2 steps, I felt dizzy. Ji-Yuxi screamed and was picked up by Sae-Chaos-hen. Hands, as a last resort, climbed up his neck. Sae-Chaos-hen, let me go. While struggling, Ji-Yuxi was thrown into the car. Sae-Chaoshen's force was so great that when Ji-Yuxi was thrown into the back seat, he bounced a few times due to inertia. If he hadn't reached out in time, palm down, to protect Ji-Yuxi's head, she would have had a big bump on her head. Subconsciously, Ji-Yuxi thanked him. But after she realized what was happening, she suddenly felt awkward and turned to look out the window. I saw her cheeks gradually turning red with embarrassment. Sae-Chaoshen's heart was moved and he thought she was extremely cute. In an instant, I felt that I was angry and said something I shouldn't have said. 11:11, don't worry, no matter what you become, I will wait for you. Chi-hee didn't know when he was clinging to the car window again, his whole face was distorted from being hit. 11:11, I've already missed you once, this time I will never let go of your hand again. Sai Cheshin's face suddenly turned gloomy. He rolled down the car window and punched him hard. This time, full force. Chi, he screamed, his eyes went dark, and he fell down. Ji Yushi was worried whether the person was dead or not, so he turned to look out the car window. Suddenly, I felt a chill all over my body. Chapter 20, Calling Are He Again? Ji Yushi realized it belatedly and turned around. The man in front of me had a gloomy face that looked like water could drip out of it. Par. It was the sound of iron opening. Sai Kaisen lifted Ji Yushi's hands above his head and passed them through the safety handrail. With a click, it closed. Ji Yushi's hands were handcuffed tightly, and no matter how he struggled, it was useless. The man was hidden in the darkness, and I couldn't see what he was doing, but I could hear some rustling sounds. Sai Kaisen is taking off his clothes. Ji Yushi's heart skipped a beat, and the madness that happened in the ward appeared before his eyes. Shu Hesie's words against strenuous exercise are still ringing in my ears. She couldn't let the baby get hurt in the slightest. You don't. Ji Yushi squeezed her legs together and curled up. Compared to the loose pajamas she wore that day, she was somewhat glad that she was wearing tight jeans today. But what she didn't know was that in addition to the ability of a pencil skirt to quickly attract men, the close-fitting curves outlined by tight jeans are even more tempting to men. Not to mention, she is the woman he loves. Sai Cheshin's shirt was undone, revealing his strong chest, half naked. 1111, be good. He said in a hoarse and sexy voice, and with a hint of laziness, he pulled her away little by little. It's too dirty. I'll wash it for you. Ji Yushi was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, as if he remembered something, his face turned red. There is no water in the car, what can I use to clean it? It's nothing more than. Sai Kaisen felt extremely satisfied when he saw Ji Yushi's ashamed and angry expression. He licked the corner of his mouth and lowered his head. The man's cool and familiar breath swept over her instantly, and the hot breath sprayed on her skin, making her shiver. Ji Yushi regained consciousness and kicked his legs randomly. We are getting divorced, you can't do this, oh? Sai Cheshin's face suddenly darkened. Without looking up, he leaned over and sealed her tightly. Sucking gently and slowly, the kiss makes a sizzling sound. There is no order at all, only rough and brutal plunder. At the thought of it, Ji Yushi felt disgusted when he kissed Ning 1111 with the same mouth he used on her in the bar that night. Aren't you afraid that Ning 1111 will be sad if you treat me like this? She doesn't understand. Why on earth did the person he loved have to be so close to him? A white light came. In an instant, Ji Yushi murmured unconsciously. Sai Kaisen, stop. The fingers that were holding Ji Yushi's ankles were almost white from the force, and she asked with red eyes, Ji Yushi, what do you think is the reason? He had no interest in matters between men and women since he was a child. He treated Ning 1111 as a sister at most and had never had any romantic feelings for her. But he treated Ji Yushi differently. As long as she stood there and did nothing, just looking at him would make his heart beat for a long time. This has been happening every day for 3 years. He originally thought that she would no longer resist him after waking up from the car accident, and he could help Ji Yu as long as he could keep Sai firmly in his hands. Even for the sake of the contract, Ji Yushi cannot divorce at will. But what he hoped most was that in the days to come, Ji Yushi would no longer be bound by a contract, but would fall in love with him willingly. His wish was about to come true, but who could have thought that not long after the good days, Ji Yushi would call her his name in his dream. Even when they were having sex, she would call her his name. Just like just now, unconscious. The person who was entangled with her was obviously Sai Kaisen. Ji Yushi came to her senses and received Ning 1111's text message. After reading the content, she instantly understood why. Chapter 21, Poor health is the reason. Ning 1111 sent a voice message. Ji Yushi's fingers trembled and he accidentally touched it. Ning 1111's voice suddenly rang out in the car, startling Ji Yushi. His tilder. Beads of sweat oozed from Sai Cheshin's forehead. He raised his hand to lift a strand of her long hair behind her back, then leaned over to kiss her fair neck. He did not forget to raise his eyes and tortured her. Ji Yushi, who am I? Ji Yushi was like a fish out of water. She opened her mouth several times but couldn't call out his name. She could only wave her arms around and trembled while enduring everything he did. Inside the dim car, there was a charming atmosphere, and Ning 1111's voice message was still playing. Sister Ji, I'm sorry about what happened today. I didn't know you were in this hospital. My second brother and I have been childhood sweethearts, and we were not able to distinguish the boundaries for a while. I am really sorry that you feel uncomfortable. Ji was in a trance listening to Ning 1111 say this and found it funny. The reason she said this was simply because she knew Sai Chaosen was with her now. When they were alone, she had not forgotten how arrogant Ning 1111 was. Ji fingers were sore now and he had no time to pay attention to Ning 1111 who was chatting with him. It took her a long time to move her eyes and look at the man who was torturing her to death above. The man was handsome, with a tall nose that looked so good even in the dim light. Beads of sweat were running down his jawline, making him look extremely sexy. Ji couldn't help but raise her hand and put it on his cheek. Sai Chaosen was stunned. Obviously he didn't expect her to do this. There was spring in her eyes, and she softly put her arms around the back of his neck, not even forgetting to rub against his chest. This subconscious approach was a sign of seeking a sense of security, and she felt so warmed in her heart. Even when she called his name unconsciously, the anger in his heart instantly dissipated a lot. He suddenly thought of something. Ji, who am I? Ji's eyes were blurred, and he said obediently, yes. Just now, I was diagnosed with a serious illness. Suddenly, Ning 1111's weak and helpless voice began to choke up. The doctor said that I can't do any strenuous exercise in the future, otherwise my body won't be able to bear it and I'll suffocate to death at any time. Ning 1111 interrupted at the critical moment, and she felt Sai Chaosen slowly stop. She even sensed his uneasiness and subconsciously looked at the man's expression. He was frowning, he was worried about Ning 1111. My heart feels sad. He pressed himself under her and plundered her frantically. Now when he heard that Ning 1111 was in trouble, he could withdraw at the critical moment. What on earth did he take her for? If he doesn't love her, why do it? If he needs it, he can go to Ning 1111. Even without him saying anything, she would definitely be happy to do it, just like that night at the bar. Sai Chaosen was already dressed at this moment. He picked up his phone and called Ning 1111. I accidentally hit the mute button. Ning 1111's voice disappeared instantly, but the speech-to-text function was not affected. She could see every word clearly. Sister Ji, I have already told my second brother that you will take care of him until I get better. If my second brother has any needs in that regard, I also hope you can satisfy him. Ning 1111's tone was full of a woman's unique reluctance and generosity. She sighed slightly. I know Sister Ji, you will definitely ask why. I really have no choice. You and second brother have been together for 3 years, so he must be used to it. If you suddenly change your bed partner, second brother will definitely be uncomfortable. Besides, you are great at seducing men, not to mention your skills in bed. 2 wish sounds. She sent me several more photos. After she saw it clearly, his mind went blank and his face suddenly froze. The person in the photo is none other than her, it's her face from a bird's eye view. Just now she and Sai Chaosen were in the car. Hasn't everyone seen it? Like being struck by lightning. Just when she was about to ask Sai Chaosen what was going on, he found out that there were even photos of them being so intimate. Then I heard him say, the hospital said 1111 is in very bad condition. I'm going to go see her. You go home first. I'll be back right after I see her. Sai Chaosen reluctantly removed his hand from her soft hair. She didn't even have time to suspect that Sai Chaosen was being intimate with her today because Ning 1111 was not feeling well. Almost subconsciously, I grabbed his hand. She was very nervous, even her palms were cold. Can you please not leave? There was a hint of pleading in his tone. Sai Chaosen's heart softened. He leaned over and kissed her on the cheek, and said softly, I will be back soon, just wait for me at home. She knew very well that if he left, based on Ning 1111's methods, he would definitely not come back tonight. Maybe, he would take advantage of Ning 1111's good physical condition to do what they just did. My heart was tightly clenched and I couldn't breathe. At the same time, those terrible memories of the past came flooding back to her. No matter where she hides, no matter how many mobile phone numbers she changes, she will be found and her photo will be received accurately. In some of the photos, she was clearly alone and there was no surveillance, yet photos of her were captured anyway. This always scared her, until she got together with Chi-hee and this happened less and less frequently. But now it appears again. She suddenly hugged Sai Chashan's waist tightly, her lips pale. Don't leave, okay? Sai Chashan's heart was completely broken by She's needs. He turned around, lifted her up and held her in his arms. Okay, I won't. Just at this moment, his cell phone rang. After the call was connected, he asked, "What's wrong? Chaoshan, where are you? Something happened to 1111. Auntie begs you to come and see her." Ning's mother's heart-wrenching voice came from the phone, hurting She's ears. Sai Kaosen noticed it and tilted her head towards his arms. She adjusted her position and found a comfortable spot in his arms. Even though there were many holes between them, she would still subconsciously go to him first when she encountered something scary. She hated herself for not living up to her expectations, but at the same time, Sai Chashan's embrace was so warm and reassuring. The street lights turned on one by one, and warm yellow light poured into the car windows. The noble and handsome man held the frail woman in his arms, and she leaned on his chest with peace of mind. This moment is so beautiful. Aunt Ning, I'm not a doctor. It won't help 1111's condition much if I go there. Or 1111, my 1111, why aren't you breathing? Sai Chashan's pupils suddenly shrank. Chapter 22, She is your shareholder. She was immersed in the horrific memories of the past and couldn't extricate herself, so naturally she didn't hear the chaos on Sai Chashan's phone. I just felt him suddenly push me away, close the car door, tell the driver to drive, and leave. She stared at the closed car door in a daze, and the horrible memories instantly engulfed her. My heart sank little by little. She curled herself up into a small shape, squeezed into the corner, and hugged her knees tightly, trying to drive away some of the fear. The driver sighed secretly when he saw the lady like this in the rearview mirror. I also felt sorry for She. Then, he seemed to remember something, took out his mobile phone, took a picture of She like this and sent it to Sai Kaosen. However, there was a tunnel on their way back to Yuan, and the message was not sent successfully. She returned home and still sat curled up on the bed like he had in the car. Ding dong. The cell phone suddenly rang in the quiet room, startling She. I raised my head and looked around the familiar surroundings, and then I realized that I was at home, and I relaxed a little. She answered the phone and asked, "Who is this? Is this Miss She? The anniversary ring that Mr. Sai ordered for you half a month ago is now ready. When are you free? I can come to your house and try it on for you." She frowned. Anniversary ring? Yes, Mrs. Sai. When Mr. Sai ordered the ring, he said that your favorite thing was ruby, so he specifically asked us to pay attention to the bigger the better. Suddenly, she saw the number circled in red marker on the calendar and remembered that it was their third wedding anniversary. She lowered her eyes and stroked her belly. Originally, she planned to go for a physical checkup together with Sai Kaosen when he returned from a business trip that day, and let him know the good news that she was pregnant. But who could have thought that when he came back early, everything would change? They are getting divorced, why would they need an anniversary diamond ring? Money, shares, jewelry, Sai Kaosen has given her a lot in the past 3 years, and there is no need for her to keep any more. What is important is that it carries a special meaning. If you see it in the future, you will inevitably make yourself sad. Just as she was about to refuse, another clerk interrupted. Which wife of Mr. Sai are you calling? Of course it's Miss She who failed to take wedding photos in our store. The clerk held up his phone, confused. Oh my. Did you not see carefully or did you not know? Mr. Sai is about to marry the jewel in the crown of the Ning group, Miss Ning 1111 Ning. They were childhood sweethearts. It is said that Miss Ning was raised by Mr. Sai. Everyone knows that Miss Ning had pursued someone else and went abroad to study, so she never married Mr. Sai. Now that we're back, the marriage that was arranged since childhood must be held. A clerk asked, didn't Mr. Sai already marry Miss She? Why is he? Oh. What's the big deal? You probably don't even know that the so-called Miss She is not from a decent family. I heard that her father was very cruel in order to keep the Gu family. They trained her to be like a prostitute, and sent her to every household. But everyone knew what a mess her family was, so they all avoided her. Mr. Sai should not be unaware of this situation, so why is he still? That's because She looks too much like Miss Ning. Just think about it, if a childhood sweetheart who has been with you since childhood leaves you all of a sudden, no one would be able to adapt, especially someone like Mr. Sai who looks cold and indifferent, but is actually very affectionate and loyal. The clerk changed the subject and said, otherwise, he wouldn't have secretly married Ji Yushi to ease his lovesickness. The shop assistants were so absorbed in the love between the childhood sweethearts of a wealthy family that they could not extricate themselves, and completely ignored the fact that they were still on the phone. Ji Yushi choked and covered her mouth tightly to prevent herself from crying out loud. But tears slowly flowed from the corners of my eyes, drop by drop, and I couldn't stop flowing. In fact, Ji Yushi had believed it since she saw Ning 1111, but these days she had been unwilling to admit and believe that she was a substitute. She is beautiful and has a good personality. She ranks first in all subjects in college. She has been pursued by countless people, and she is originally proud of herself. But reality pressed her back down little by little, bending her waist and breaking it, until her self-esteem was crushed to pieces. The clerk probably finally realized that he was gossiping about someone in front of him, so he quickly tried to make amends. I'm so sorry, if you're not free, how about we meet you next week? At this time, a louder female voice interrupted, all right, stop chatting here, something big has happened, quickly take out the engagement diamond ring that Mr. Sai ordered, quickly. What's wrong? What happened? Ji Yushi originally wanted to hang up the phone, but when she heard such an urgent situation, she immediately became nervous and wanted to know what had happened to Sai Chaos-en. Miss Ning is dying in the hospital. Her greatest wish before she died was to marry Mr. Sai. I heard that his secret wife knew that Miss Ning was ill and would die in the near future, but she still refused to give up her position as Mrs. Sai. She was just a stand-in for 3 years, but she really thought she was the real Mrs. Sai. I think she is just a cuckoo occupying the magpie's nest without knowing what she is doing. Okay, stop talking and hurry up. Ji Yushi's heart was broken by these words. But they were both right, and she had no reason to talk back. Just as she was about to hang up, someone suddenly snatched the phone from her hand and angrily asked, when did the service attitude of your DT bridal shop become so bad? Even you shareholders dare to discuss it. Ji Yushi stared blankly at her mother-in-law who had come over at some point in time. As she listened to her words defending her, her heart began to warm. Qin Hua was originally a big leader, so her tone was naturally majestic, not to mention that she was still angry. The clerk over there immediately recognized Qin Hua's voice and immediately flattered her. I'm so sorry, Miss Qin, I will immediately fire the employee who gossiped about Miss Ji Yushi and Mr. Sai. Is that all? Qin Hua put his phone on the table, switched to a video call, pulled out a stool for Ji Yushi to sit on with him, and climbed onto her shoulders. I'm going to make this clear today. The only daughter-in-law recognized by the Sai family is Ji Yushi, and there has never been another one. If you dare to say something nonsense again, you can just disappear. Chapter 23, Ji Yushi is a good person. DT was originally a bridal shop acquired by Sishi. If Ji Yushi hadn't liked their wedding dresses, Sai Chaos-en would never have used them. Similarly, if Ji Yushi and T insisted on using their wedding dresses, DT would never have become a trendy brand. It will still be the same as before, gathering dust in the corner in obscurity. He didn't even have a chance to show his face and just disappeared silently. Ms. Ji Yushi, oh no, Mrs. Sai, I'm really sorry for saying that. DT really appreciates choosing us. After hearing Qin Hua's story, the store manager felt grateful but also more guilty. This brand has been with her from her youth until the birth of her child. Only she knows how much effort she has put into it. DT is almost her entire life. Her original intention was to realize what was in her mind and not to follow the crowd. But who could have thought that no one would buy into her persistence and her staying up late to draw and make patterns? When she was about to give up, she remembered there was a woman who came to look at wedding dresses. Unlike previous customers, those who can afford it are picky about what is not particularly expensive, while those who cannot afford it focus on quality and try their best to bargain for the price. Only that woman could see from her eyes how much she loved that wedding dress. She has always been grateful to this woman. Every time she wakes up in the middle of the night, she would wonder if she had not been face blind. It's great that someone she only met once can leave an impression in her mind. The store manager looked through the screen at the young woman sitting next to Qin Hua. She was as tough and gentle as she had been when she whispered encouragement to her that day. She said, "Your wedding dress is great. Stick to your idea and keep doing it with passion." She had no idea what this encouragement was. With her career failure, her husband cheating on her and taking away all her savings, and her child being hospitalized for fever and illness, everyone was blaming and persuading her to find a class and stop pursuing her dream. But it was only Ji Yushi who made him persist. Now she allowed her shop assistant to speak ill of her benefactor, and she felt extremely guilty. "Mrs. Sai, I'm sorry." Ji Yushi smiled and said, "I don't blame you." On the contrary, she still wanted to thank them for what they said behind her back. Can quickly see the distance between himself and Sai Chaos-hen. Qin Huer said, "Is an apology enough?" The store manager lowered his head, wanting to make amends sincerely. "No matter how Madam Qin punishes me, I have no complaints." Qin Huer originally thought that this store manager was a good person, so she put a lot of effort into her products. She said, "Cancel half of the dividends." Several shop assistants were so frightened that their eyes widened. That was several 100 million yuan, and it was gone just like that. After saying that, Qin Huer turned around and asked Ji Yushi, "What do you think?" Ji Yushi nodded. At this moment, her mind was not here at all. "My mind is full of thoughts about divorce." Qin Huer was sitting next to Ji Yushi, so how could he not notice Ji Yushi's distraction? But think about it, her man left her and found another wife to take care of the sick Bai Yueguang. It's the middle of the night, a man and a woman alone. It is inevitable that some explosive things will happen. Suddenly, I felt angry and distressed. What made them angry was that Ning 1111, that little green tea bitch, suddenly came back at the critical moment and disrupted their peaceful and beautiful life that they had finally built. Ji Yushi is the same, always saying that she treats her as her own mother, but she always only reports good news and never bad news. If Sai Chashin's driver hadn't sent Ji Yushi's photo to her today, she would have had no idea that Ning 1111 had gone so far. And her son is the same, he has no idea at all. The more Qin Huer thought about it, the angrier he became. He stood up suddenly, scaring Ji Yushi. "Ji Yushi, come on, Mom will take you to catch the adulterer." Ji Yushi stood still. Her watery eyes were full of surprise. "You don't tell me anything. Do you still treat me as your mother and yourself as the daughter-in-law of the Sai family?" Qin Huer was particularly angry at this moment. When Sai Chaos-hen said he wanted to marry Ji Yushi, she heard a lot of rumors just like the rest of the people. After marrying into the Sai family, she never gave them a good face. But after spending time with her for a long time, I found that Ji Yushi was a really nice girl. Just like a cup of fine tea, the more you taste it, the more you like it, and the more you taste it, the more it suits your taste. A trace of bitterness appeared on Ji Yushi's lips. "Mom, it's too late. Let's forget it. We can talk about it tomorrow if there is anything." She understood that there was no future for her and Sai Chaos-hen, so she no longer had any extravagant hopes. What's more, she knew better than anyone that it would be uncomfortable to see Sai Chaos-hen and Ning 1111 being intimate. Rather than seeing it with your own eyes, it is better to pretend you know nothing. I have it all clear in my mind, but when I think about divorce. Her heart began to twitch uncontrollably, and the pain made it hard for her to breathe. Qin Huer didn't say much to Ji Yushi, and directly dragged her to the hospital. "If we don't go now, how can we catch the couple in the act?" Ji Yushi was shocked. "My mother-in-law is a decisive person, and is even nicknamed Crazy Woman. But in the past few years since she married into the Sai family, she has not been gentle, but at least amiable. I have never seen her like this." Suddenly, I began to wonder whether Sai Chaos-hen was my mother-in-law's biological son. Just as she was wondering, Qin Huer had already stuffed her into the car. He stepped on the accelerator and drove straight to the hospital. 1111, how do you feel?" Mother Ning felt very uneasy when she saw Ning 1111, who looked pale and haggard. She was afraid that she would die again like she did just now. Fortunately, Sai Chaos-hen found an authoritative doctor in time and successfully rescued the person. Ning 1111 pulled the corners of her cracked lips, unable to speak, so she could only shake her head slightly. Mother Ning cried out, letting out the breath she had been holding back. 1111. I only gave birth to you as my child. If you died, how would I live? Mom, look, I'm fine now, don't cry. Ning 1111 took a lot of effort to raise her arm and wipe away the tears from her mother's face. Ning's mother's heart-wrenching grief and Ning 1111's weakness not only did not make Sai Chaos-hen feel distressed, but instead made him feel extremely annoyed. Sai Chaos-hen looked at his watch from time to time, and tapped the table with his hands from time to time. Ning 1111 noticed Sai Chashin's impatience, so she turned around and said, "Second brother, thank you for saving me today. Saikayasen hummed through his nose. Get up and leave. Ning 1111 quickly glanced over. Chaoshan, it's so late, why don't you just rest here? You still have to go to the company tomorrow. It's not good to toss and turn. Relying on her status as an elder, Ning's mother simply locked the door. Ning 1111 pretended to be considerate. Mom, what are you doing? Through the door, Ning's mother showed her smug look. Just take a good rest. There were aphrodisiacs brought back from abroad in the ward, so there was no need to worry that Saikayasen would not be impulsive after a night. Chapter 24. When Ning 1111 saw that the door was locked, she wanted to jump off the bed and open the door. Saikayasen supported Ning 1111 in time and she didn't fall to the ground. You just had surgery. If you don't take care of your body, who do you expect to take care of it for you in the future? It seemed like a reproach, but Ning 1111 knew it clearly. If he didn't treat her as his own, people like Saikayasen would never meddle in other people's affairs. Ning 1111 raised her eyes. The man in front of me has become much more mature than in his youth, and his every move exudes charm. No woman can resist him. He is truly worthy of being her man. I stretched out my hand and was about to touch him, but Saikayasen moved away. When she was a child, Saikayasen would be extremely nervous when she got a little bump or bruise. Now that she had a major surgery, he didn't feel sorry at all. Ning 1111 curled her fingers, feeling wronged and distressed. Her eyes quickly turned red. Second brother, do you dislike me? No. Saikayasen said truthfully. Ning 1111 asked, then why? Not divorcing Ji Yushi. She didn't dare to ask the next few questions. She had already learned her lesson this afternoon. I could only change the subject. Second brother, I won't live long with this disease. Is there no future for us? Ning 1111 cried and gradually became unable to speak. Saikayasen looked at her crying so heartbreakingly, and he felt nothing in his heart, just irritation. Thinking of what the doctor had just said about not getting emotional, she could only comfort her. The doctor said the chances of recovery are small, but that doesn't mean it won't get better. They always like to scare you like this. Just relax and get well. There's still a lot of time left. There's no way I can be cured. Who would marry me if I had this disease? I might as well just die. Ning 1111 completely collapsed and cried heartbreakingly, while not forgetting to secretly pay attention to Saikayasen's reaction out of the corner of her eye. Saikayasen was silent. Ning 1111 said desperately, second brother, are you still blaming me? Without. Isn't it all your fault? If it weren't for you, our Sai family would have had a few more people. The door was kicked open from the outside with a bang. Saikayasen straightened his back slowly when he saw the person coming, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Mom. Chin Hua walked in and rolled his eyes at him. Don't call me mom, I don't have a son like you. Ji Yushi wanted to persuade them, but when he came in and saw that they were the only two in the room, he felt uncomfortable and just stood aside quietly as a background board. The ward was not small. Chin Hua glanced at Ning 1111 who was lying behind Saikayasen. I have something I want to talk to 1111 about. It's not convenient for a grown man like you to stay here. Go out and wait first. Saikayasen nodded and walked to Ji Yushi's side, wanting to hold her hand and ask her to go out together, but she avoided him. He rubbed his fingers, said nothing, opened the door and went out. Chin Hua closed the door and walked to the bed in her high heels. She had just finished surgery and was lying crookedly on the hospital bed. Her face was extremely pale. Compared to the last time I saw her in the hospital, this time it looked like she wouldn't live for many days. Ning 1111 perked up. Aunt Chin, why are you here? Who is your Aunt Chin? Stop trying to claim to be a relative. Chin Hua said with disgust. Ning 1111 pursed her lips and tears instantly flowed down. Aunt Chin, my second brother and I grew up together as childhood sweethearts. It was a marriage arranged by Grandpa Sai. Even if you don't recognize it, you still watched me grow up. In the past, you loved me the most and bought me this and that. Chin Hua sneered but said nothing. Ning 1111 burst into tears. 3 years ago, I also wanted to be with my second brother, but I was a poor student and couldn't learn anything. If I didn't go abroad for further studies, how could I move forward side by side with my second brother in the future? You don't know how strict the study abroad is and how tight the study schedule is. In order to catch up with my second brother quickly, I studied day and night and didn't dare to contact him. I studied until I was in poor health, but I was still studying. There was not a day when I didn't think about my second brother when I was abroad. If it wasn't true love, why would a spoiled young lady like me go through such hardships? Ning 1111 was already in a weak state after the operation, and now after crying like that, she was even less energetic. I don't know if Chin Hua was afraid that Ning 1111 would really jump over, but she did soften her tone when she spoke. 3 years ago, my son studied medicine, and he looked sloppy without dressing up, so many rich ladies despised him. It's normal for you, the daughter of a rich family, to be too proud and not want to marry. I can understand that you want to marry a man who matches you and can coax you. After all, I have been through your time. But you are wrong to come back and mess up Chao Shen's life now. He has already married Ji Yuxi. No matter how much you love him, you should know how to write the words of courtesy, righteousness, integrity and shame. For the sake of our past friendship, I advise you not to give up being a rich girl and become a mistress who interferes with other people's marriages. You will suffer retribution in the future, do you know? Ning's mother was testing the water temperature for Ning 1111 when she was suddenly choked by Chin Hua's last sentence and started coughing non-stop. Ning 1111 was still stubborn. How could I be the mistress? My second brother and I grew up together and were engaged to each other since we were young. How could I be the one who interfered and destroyed other people's marriages? I didn't. Ji Yuxi originally thought that she would never see Sai Chaos Hen again from tomorrow onwards, so she just had to endure it and it would pass. But after listening to Ning 1111's sophistry, he couldn't help but said, "Then may I ask Miss Ning, who was so shameless as to cuddle with Sai Chaos Hen in the middle of the night and was even recorded on video?" Ning 1111 pretended to be dead and shook her head, refusing to admit it. "Did you see the face clearly in the video?" Ji Yuxi really didn't dare to say it. It happened so suddenly at that time, how could she have time to see it? Looking at Ning 1111's determined eyes, a hint of anticipation arose in my heart. I hope the people in that video aren't them at all, but a mistake. Chin Hua was instantly furious and raised his hand to slap Ning 1111 in the face. Ning's mother was not a pushover either. She tried to stop him but failed. Immediately, a fight broke out between the two of them. Ji Yuxi hurried to separate the fight. Ning 1111 saw such a good opportunity. She quietly stood up, kicked the sharp object in her hand, and hit Ji Yuxi's stomach. 1111, why did you get out of bed? Ning's mother was worried about her daughter and kept an eye on her all the time, but after she shouted like that, Ji Yuxi also turned back to look at her. Ning 1111 immediately held onto the edge of the table and said weakly, "Stop fighting. I want to go to the bathroom." Chin Hua now wished he could chop off this little bitch Ning 1111. He didn't care what she wanted to do and just rushed over and kicked her. Chapter 25, the first child of the Sai family. Stop making trouble. Sai Chaos Hen heard the loud noise in the ward outside and came in immediately, asking the bodyguards to stop this childish behavior. Ning's mother's hair was messed up, her luxury brand clothes worth millions were torn into strips, and her mouth was bruised. Even so, she was still unwilling to accept it and stared at Chin Hua with her neck stiff. If the bodyguards hadn't held her back, she would have dared to go up and touch him. On the other hand, Chin Hua didn't have a single hair out of place and was handling the situation with ease. Ji Yuxi couldn't help but admire him. 1111, I'm telling you, if the mistress dares to do anything shameless again, tell your mother and I'll kill her. Everyone knew who Chin Hua was talking about. Sai Chaos Hen frowned. Mom, 1111 just had surgery. Let's wait until she's a little better before we talk. It's getting late today, let's go back first. Chin Hua shook off his hand on his arm, raised his finger, and was about to teach him a lesson. Suddenly, the cell phone rang. It was a call from Mr. Sai's ward. Chin Hua answered the call and walked out, saying, "I'll deal with you when I get back." The door closed, and for a moment, the ward returned to silence. Ning 1111 made a bitter face. "Mom, I want to go to the bathroom." Mother Ning sighed, stood up and walked towards Ning 1111. Just as she straightened her waist, she heard a click. Her waist was sprained. The pain made her grimace in pain and tears came out. "Ouch, ouch, that hurts." The pain was so severe that she dared not even move and could only stay in the horse stance. Sai Chaos Hen frowned and ordered his bodyguard to take the man for treatment. Ji Yuxi pursed her lips and was about to leave, but was stopped by Ning 1111. "Sister Ji Yuxi, can you help me go to the toilet? She didn't want to care and shook his head to refuse. You can find a nurse. Ning 1111 morally blackmailed. The nurses are all busy with important patients now. I just want to go to the toilet. There is no need to trouble them. Now that things have come to this, she has no choice but to help. Looking at the frosted translucent glass door, Ning 1111 probably wouldn't dare to do anything to her. She stepped forward and helped Ning 1111 to the toilet. The door closed and she was about to go out, but Ning 1111 grabbed his arm. She instantly became alert, her hands subconsciously protecting her lower abdomen. What do you want to do? Ning 1111 saw her actions and smiled, but she felt very disgusted in her heart. What can I do? I just want to go to the toilet. Besides, my second brother is outside now. Even if I hate you, I won't hurt you in front of him. Just bring me here. If I can move my hands, I won't need you. There were many retention needles inserted on the back of Ning 1111's hand, and there was no good place. She pursed her lips, said nothing more, and leaned over to help her take off her pants. Ning 1111 stood there and could clearly see the tiny kiss marks on She's chest. It's obvious who did it. Ning 1111 suppressed her anger and said, Sister She, why aren't you well yet? This is also the first time I serve someone like this. Please wait. Just when she took off half of her clothes, she saw fresh marks on her body. She was so surprised that her words were stuck in her mouth. Your body won't allow it, right? Subconsciously, she asked. Ning 1111 nodded, her tone rather helpless. Yes, I was not feeling well and my second brother felt sorry for me, so he didn't continue. So when Tangning showed me the video, I said that it wasn't me and my second brother at all, but no one believed me, at least you didn't. These words were like the tip of a knife wrapped in honey. Before I could even feel happy, I was stabbed hard. It hurt so much. So, nothing happened between Sai Chaos Hen and Ning 1111 at the bar that night. Until today. She suddenly laughed out loud, then leaned weakly against the glass door, feeling that God was playing a trick on him. Perhaps because he felt that the time was too long, Sai Chaos Hen was afraid that she would be bullied, and he was also afraid that Ning 1111 would really faint in there. Raise your hand, knock on the door, bang bang bang. 1111, are you okay? Sai Cheshen's voice came from outside the door. She found his address to be particularly harsh. Second brother, I'll be there soon. Ning 1111 responded loudly to the outside before she stood up, lowered her eyes, and motioned for she to help her put on her pants. She watched coldly and refused to move. Ning 1111 smiled, Sister she, don't forget that you yourself admitted that you were able to get so much money because you were my stand-in. Now, can you help me pull up my pants? That's not too much, right? Why haven't you come out yet? Sai Cheshen's voice came again. Ning 1111 laughed, Second brother, I can't pull up my pants. Sister she is helping me pull up my pants. Sister she said it was her first time serving someone, so she might be a little slow. Second brother, let's give Sister she a little patience. Sai Chaos Hen frowned. What Ning 1111 said was indeed true. After she had the car accident, she and the nanny had been taking care of her. Even after she recovered from her illness, they were afraid that she would relapse again. Let alone taking care of others, they were just taking care of her. How could she be asked to take care of Ning 1111? He picked up his cell phone, dialed a number, and called a nurse over. Ning 1111 was in the bathroom and had no idea about this. She looked down at Shi and said, Sister Shi, you won't help me. Could it be that you want to see more marks on my body? Shi felt nauseous and stood up to vomit in the sink. Vomiting very violently. Ning 1111 was shocked. She had never expected that she would have morning sickness. She was afraid that it was Sai Chaos Hen outside the door who would find out. She endured the pain from the retained needle on the back of her hand and forced herself to pull it up. Looking at Shi who was still vomiting, he asked, Are you pregnant? She instantly thought of 1,000 ways that Ning 1111 was going to plot against the child in her belly. Her eyes were red from vomiting. No, what do you want to do? Ning 1111 felt relieved instantly when she saw her reaction. It seems that from the look on Shi's face, Sai Chaos Hen doesn't know that Shi is pregnant. Now that's the case, it's easy. It's best not to, otherwise, my second brother won't let you go. Ji Yushi frowned. What do you mean? Ning 1111 held onto the tiles on the wall and looked back at her. You know, don't you? The first child of every generation in the Sai family must be sacrificed. My second brother's father's elder brother was the one who was sacrificed. Suddenly, she said sympathetically, but don't worry. Maybe you'll be the lucky one and you'll be allowed to raise him until he's a child. Well, but, if you develop feelings for me then you'll be even more reluctant to let me go, right? In a flash, Ji Yushi's already pale face turned almost grey. How so? I realized it belatedly, as if I remembered something. No wonder Sai Chaos-hen reacted so strongly when he heard that she was pregnant. It turned out that it was not just because of Ning 1111. Chapter 26, Her Child. Open the door. Ji Yushi looked at the intimate figures of Sai Chaos-hen and Ning 1111. I don't know which nerve was touched. She walked a few steps forward, put her soft and boneless arm against his, stood on tiptoe, and gently kissed his earlobe. Hubby, take good care of Miss Ning, I'll wait for you at home Tilda. Sai Cheshen's breath stagnated. Although he didn't understand her intention, his eyes were much gentler when he looked at her. After being married for 3 years, Ji Yushi naturally knew where his sensitive spots were. She seemed to want to win over Ning 1111, with a smile in the corner of her eyes. Hubby, I'll leave first. When she saw Ning 1111 staring at the ear that Sai Chaos-hen had just kissed, tears suddenly fell. He was extremely angry, but because Sai Chaos-hen was here he couldn't lose his temper. He could only dig into the tender flesh on his palm to stay calm. Sai Chaos-hen didn't have the heart to pay attention to Ning 1111 at all. He just held Ji Yushi's hand and told her to go home and call him to let him know she was safe. Ning 1111's cheeks were covered with tear marks. She had no choice but to raise her hand to wipe away the tears, but she forgot about the retained needle on the back of her hand. The pain made her cry even harder. Brother, it hurts so much. The back of my hand hurts, but my heart feels even sadder. She and Sai Chaos-hen had been childhood sweethearts for more than 10 years. He always protected her well. Even when she was in a bad mood and refused to eat by herself and wanted him to feed her, he would patiently feed her one spoonful at a time without any complaints. It was nothing like now. She was crying like this. She just wanted him to accompany her, but he just pulled his hand away coldly and let her have a good rest. Second brother, the reason I'm like this now is because of Sister Ji Yushi. Can't you stay and accompany me? When Ning 1111 said this, her eyes were as red as a rabbit, and she cried so hard that she couldn't breathe. Sai Chaos-hen looked into her eyes, and inexplicably thought of Ji Yushi who went back alone. He cleared his throat and said, you still have your aunt to accompany you, but 1111 is alone. Ning 1111 widened her eyes, tears silently flowing from the corners of her eyes. She slowly slid them down, covered them with the quilt, and said sullenly, then second brother, you can go back. Sai Chaos-hen took a step forward and turned back, placing the bank card on her bedside table. There is 30 million in the card. 1111 doesn't want you to become like this. You should have a good rest and listen to the doctor's advice and take care of yourself. It's too late today, I'll come to see you tomorrow. Ning 1111 bit her lower lip tightly in the dark bed to stop herself from crying. But people were so sad that even if they tried hard not to say anything, their bodies would still tremble uncontrollably. Ning's mother saw it all. She hugged Ning 1111 through the quilt, feeling distressed. Okay, 1111, don't cry. No matter how outstanding Sai Chaos-hen is, he is just a man. Men all have bad habits. They want this and that when they have this. Others are fine, but Ji Yushi is better looking than me, has a better figure, and is a little gentler in character, but she can't compare to me in any other way. Ning 1111 was really not convinced. From childhood to adulthood, she was the center of attention wherever she went. She also relied on the fact that she could instigate Sai Chaos-hen to do this and that. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was the little princess in the circle. She has the capital. But what about Ji Yushi? As long as she is well known in the circle, everyone knows about the mess that the Ji family has gone through. It would be fine if her mother's family couldn't bring any benefits, but she still wants the Sai family to help. Ning's mother was also angry, but what made her angry was that her precious daughter, whom she couldn't bear to touch a single hair, had become like this physically because of Ji Yushi. She suppressed her anger and comforted Ning 1111, don't be sad. You left without saying a word for several years. Who wouldn't be angry? Even if Chao Shen has good character, he has been pampered since he was a child and has a temper. Don't think that he is pampering that woman now, he is just greedy for the novelty. When he gets tired of this side dish, it will be fine. Men are like this. Ning 1111 somehow sensed her mother's sadness. Is my dad like this too? Ning's mother lowered her head and tucked the corner of the quilt for her, sighing, yes, all men are like this. But no matter how much he spends playing outside, you are the mistress. As long as you are patient, won't you own half of his company shares and property? You need to have a long-term vision. What you want to do is to be the mistress of the house, not a concubine like Ji Yuxi. Concubines come and go, and it is inevitable that they are favored but have no financial power. She picked up the card that Sai Chaosen had put down. Here, although it's not much, it's still enough to buy a few bags and do some beauty treatments. Ning 1111 looked at the zeros above with disdain. Mom, why don't you know that I'm the concubine of the flowing water? Maybe I'm even worse than a concubine. The concubines in other TV dramas are at least spoiled to the skies, but what about her? Nothing at all, only a credit card with a balance of 30 million. There's nothing to buy. When I think of what Ji Yuxi said at that time, that Sai Chaosen divided half of his property with her during their divorce, and then look at myself again. She is so sick now, and her second brother only gave her this little to comfort her. Suddenly, I felt even sadder. Mother Ning comforted him without knowing the truth. How could my daughter Lin Jiero be just a concubine? Don't think too much. Take a good rest and keep your pretty face moist and fair. Can't you seduce Sai Chaosen to be your mistress? Ning 1111 glanced at her mother with disdain. You can tolerate it, but I can't. If I want to do it, I want to be the one and only one. Besides, my vision is always very accurate. Second brother will definitely not be like my father and spend his days drinking and partying outside. He will definitely be loyal. Mom, has my dad come home recently? Ning 1111 asked suddenly. Mother Ning shook her head. You don't even keep an eye on your husband. What if he gets another illegitimate child? Then I won't get less regrets. Give me your phone. I'll call my dad. His precious daughter is injured like this, and he didn't even come to see her. Ji Yuxi did not follow Sai Chaosen's instructions to take the car, but walked alone on the street to relax. Behind him, the driver drove slowly following. She saw that the driver was so sleepy that he yawned several times, and wanted to ask him to go back, but he insisted and refused to leave. However, Ji Yuxi quickly thought of what Ning 1111 had said to her. All children of every generation in the Sai family will be sacrificed. Your children will be sacrificed. These words kept echoing in Ji Yuxi's mind. Just thinking about it makes my heart ache, and the pain is so severe that even taking a few deep breaths can't relieve it. She subconsciously stroked her belly, leaned against the tree trunk, and slowly squatted down. Baby, what should mommy do? There was no one around, only an old playground where a few parents and their children were playing. Mom, come up and sit too. The baby patted the empty seat on the swing next to him and gestured. Chapter 27, Cubs. Ji Yuxi slowly stood up and walked towards the baby sitting on the swing. The driver was too sleepy and fell asleep little by little, so he didn't see what Ji Yuxi did. She walked over to a baby, squatted down, and said softly, "What's your name?" The baby was very brave and was not afraid of Ji Yuxi, who suddenly spoke to him, but perhaps it was more likely that he knew that his mother was making a phone call not far away, so he was safe. Ji Yuxi had obviously never been a mother, but she could still clearly feel that the little guy's mother a few meters away was concentrating on making a phone call, but her entire attention was on them. In other words, the little guy's mother knows every move of the little guy. The little guy raised his chubby face, picked up the short phone and put it to his lips. Pretty sister, my mom said that I can't tell others my name, especially people I don't know well. Ji Yuxi was amused by the little guy and burst out laughing. Baby, you are very vigilant, and you have done a lot of good things. You won't be easily captured by bad guys in the future. The little guy was praised by someone, and such a beautiful girl. His face flushed and he was embarrassed. Now we have talked, and we are friends. If you still want to know my name, I will tell you. Ji Yuxi was stunned. The little guy covered his mouth with his hands and whispered, I'm only telling you one person. Actually, my bad dad always messes up my and mom's lives, so thanks to him, I've developed the same sharp eyes as Sun Wukong. As long as there's someone wearing a black suit and tie, black sunglasses, and talking to a headset with his head tilted 100 meters away, I know that dad has found us again. She was listening so attentively that she didn't notice that the driver suddenly woke up, looked for her but couldn't find her, and finally came here in a hurry. R. The bad dad's lackey is trying to snatch me back again, I'm going to beat you. The little guy jumped off the swing in an instant, grabbed a handful of dirt, and sprinkled it at the driver, trying to blind his eyes. While the driver was dodging, the little guy didn't forget to throw pebbles at him. Pretty sister, my bad dad is here to catch me and mom. Although I like you very much, for the safety of me and mom, I have to go first. The little guy twisted his leg and hadn't taken a few steps when he was caught by the driver. Whose naughty child are you? You throw things at people when you don't agree with them. Where are your parents? I'm going to teach you a lesson. The driver clamped the kid in his armpits, and the kid jumped around like a fish. You dare. If you dare to hit me, I'll let your bad dad fire you. The driver was stunned and subconsciously looked at Ji. Madam, when did you and the young master have such a big child? He had been Saichashin's driver for several years, and had never heard of a child this old. Ji was amused by his words. It's not our shins, it's this baby who thinks is his bad dad's subordinate. After Ji's explanation, the driver realized that it was a misunderstanding. He quickly put the kid down, looked at him angrily with his hands pierced, took out a handful of candy from his pocket and handed it to him. Uncle taught you a lesson without understanding. It's uncle's fault. The driver has children at home, and sometimes because Saikayasen and Ji quarrel, he has to drive the car back and forth, and rarely gets off work on time. The kids at home were making a lot of noise and he was always late to pick them up. Later, he gradually became aware of it and used the candies that were popular among the kids to coax them. Over time, his pockets no longer contained cigarettes but instead contained candies. The colorful candy wrappers looked even more beautiful and attractive under the refraction of the light, especially this candy. The little guy actually wanted to eat it but was not allowed. He turned his head to look at his mother who was still on the phone, stretched out his hand but stopped, as if he wanted to take it but didn't dare to. She stuffed all the candies into his little pocket and said, "Eat them with confidence. My sister and this uncle are not bad people. I will explain everything to your mother." "Baby, what are you eating?" The baby's mother came over immediately, not knowing whether she had finished her phone call or because she saw her child eating someone else's food. The little guy put the candy down and said, "Mom, I listened to you and didn't eat it." The woman rubbed the top of his head and smiled gently. "Okay, you are so good, then mommy will reward you with the candy that uncle gave you." The little guy called Zai's eyes lit up instantly, and when he peeled the candy skin, he did not forget to give one to Ji as well. Ji was flattered and took it. The woman said, "I didn't expect that ZZ liked you so much the first time he saw you. He is very alert and never talks to strangers, especially the driver in a suit and tie just now." Ji looked at the woman, quietly waiting for what to come. Judging from the reaction of ZZ's divine palm just now, this woman is definitely not ordinary. The woman looked at her belly. "Are you pregnant?" Since the baby was educated so well, there was no need for Ji to hide it. She looked at the driver who was playing with the baby not far away, and she nodded and hummed softly. "You seem to care about this baby very much," she said, looking at the sadness on Ji's face. "Logically speaking, I have only met you once, so I shouldn't have the audacity to give you advice." She could actually find some clues from ZZ's words. "You tell me, I believe you." The woman looked at Ji's eyes that were eager for an answer, as if she remembered herself in the past. She looked at someone not far away and said slowly, "A few years ago, I was actually the same as you. I married into a wealthy family, but who knew that his ex-girlfriend came back? With my pride, I would definitely not stay. But when we were getting divorced, I got pregnant. I also once thought about whether to abort it. After all, it was an unformed fetus, in other words, just a ball of waste blood. Maybe wealthy families have some strange rules that we ordinary people can't understand. When I learned that I could marry the CEO of a wealthy family, it turned out that they planned to give birth to a child in my belly to give blood to my ex-girlfriend, and by the way, give me some money so that I could divorce. I'm really confused. Did his ex-girlfriend save his family in her previous life, or was I a bad person in my previous life, so my child had to be used as a blood bag? They don't understand that a life is growing slowly in my belly. I was pregnant for 10 months, and each month was harder than the last, but I still persisted." She listened fascinatedly. How was her situation any different from his own? "When I thought about my baby being tortured, I ran away with the baby on the day of delivery.